Welcome to Paranormal Pages. Let's get straight into the True Scary Stories compilation. Story 1. The Unseen Guest. Every night, as the clock chimed 12, a chilling silence descended upon our old Victorian house. It was during one such night that my daughter, Lily, first told me about the stranger in her bed. Her voice, quivering with fear, woke me from a deep sleep. "Daddy, there's someone sleeping in my bed," she whispered. I rushed to her room, my heart pounding, only to find her alone, curled up with her teddy bear. I checked every possible hiding spot, but there was no one. I assured her it was just a dream and tucked her in, dismissing it as a child's nightmare. But the next night, she insisted again, her eyes wide with terror. "He's back, Daddy. The man in my bed." This time, I stayed in her room, watching over her as she drifted back to sleep. Hours passed, and just as I began to doze off, a cold breeze swept through the room. The air grew thick, and I felt an inexplicable presence. I opened my eyes to the moonlight casting shadows, but what I saw next froze me to the core. There, on the edge of Lily's bed, was the indentation of a person, as if someone invisible lay beside her. I reached out, my hand trembling, and the space was ice cold. I pulled Lily into my arms and fled to the living room, where we spent the rest of the night with all the lights on. The following day, I searched for any logical explanation. I researched the history of our house, spoke to neighbors, and even consulted a medium. They all said the same thing: our home was clean, with no past of hauntings or tragedies. Yet, every night, the presence returned. I installed cameras, hoping to catch a glimpse of the uninvited guest, but they showed nothing. No one believed me, not even my wife. She thought the stress of my job was getting to me, causing hallucinations. But Lily knew. She felt it too. We were both haunted by something unseen, something that left us feeling watched and vulnerable. One evening, as I read Lily a bedtime story, she suddenly looked past me and smiled. "He's here, Daddy," she said calmly. "He likes the story too." A chill ran down my spine. I turned around, but there was nothing, just the empty room and the soft hum of the night. I couldn't shake the feeling that we were not alone, that the house breathed with a life of its own. As days turned into weeks, the strain began to show. Sleepless nights took their toll, and I started seeing shadows move in the corners of my eyes. Whispers filled the silence, words I couldn't quite catch. My daughter's once bright eyes now held a depth of knowledge no child should possess. She spoke of the man as a friend, saying he was lonely and just wanted to stay with us. Tonight, as I sit here writing this, I can feel him. The air is heavy, charged with anticipation. Lily is asleep, her breathing steady. But I know he's here, in the darkness, waiting. I can almost hear his breath, feel his gaze upon us. The house creaks, the wind howls, and I'm left wondering if I'm losing my mind or if the horror is real. The line between reality and nightmare is blurring, and I fear what will happen when it disappears entirely. The days blurred into nights, and our house became a battleground between the seen and the unseen. Lily's laughter turned brittle, her once vibrant eyes now clouded with secrets. She spoke to the stranger, whispered secrets into the darkness, and I wondered if she was merely a child or a conduit to something beyond our understanding. I researched the house's history, desperate for answers. The walls held memories, layers of paint concealing forgotten tragedies. The previous owners had vanished without a trace, leaving behind an eerie silence. I traced their footsteps through old photographs, their smiles frozen in sepia tones. But the stranger remained elusive, a phantom who defied logic. One night, as the clock struck midnight, I sat by Lily's bedside, my fingers brushing her hair. She slept soundly, oblivious to the tension that hung in the air. The room felt colder, the shadows deeper. And then, I heard it, the faintest whisper, like a moth brushing against my ear. "Why do you seek me?" The words were soft, almost tender, but they carried a weight that pressed against my chest. I turned, expecting to find the stranger, but the room was empty. The walls seemed to breathe, exhaling secrets. I pressed my ear against the wallpaper, listening. The whispers grew louder, a chorus of lost souls. They spoke of betrayal, of love unrequited, of promises broken. Each syllable etched into my skin, leaving invisible scars. Lily stirred, her eyes fluttering open. "He's here," she said, her voice distant. "He wants to tell you something." I leaned closer, my heart pounding. "What does he want?" I asked. She smiled, her innocence fading. "He wants you to remember." "Remember what?" The question haunted me. Memories resurfaced, my childhood, the laughter of friends, the scent of my mother's cooking. But there was something else, a darkness I couldn't grasp. The stranger was a key, unlocking doors I'd sealed shut. I spent nights pacing the hallways, my footsteps echoing. The walls whispered secrets, urging me to confront the past. I dug into old journals, letters, anything that held a clue. And then, in the attic, hidden beneath a floorboard, I found it, a faded photograph. A man stood beside a gnarled tree, his face blurred. His eyes bore into mine, accusing, pleading. Lily watched as I studied the photograph. "That's him," she said. "The man who sleeps in my bed." The pieces fell into place, the stranger, the whispers, the forgotten history. He was a lost soul, trapped between realms, seeking redemption. But what had he done? What sin bound him to our house? As the nights wore on, Lily grew weaker. The stranger fed on her innocence, draining her life force. I confronted him, standing in the moonlit room, my anger burning. "Why her?" I demanded. His form flickered, ethereal. "She reminds me of my past lover," he whispered. "I failed her, and now I'm cursed." I made a choice, a desperate pact. If he released Lily, I would help him find peace. He agreed, and the room filled with a blinding light. Lily slept peacefully, her cheeks flushed. But the stranger remained, his eyes filled with gratitude and sorrow. And so, we began our quest. The walls guided us, revealing hidden passages, forgotten names. Lily's laughter returned, but I knew time was running out. The stranger's story unfolded, a love lost, a betrayal unforgiven. We follow the whispers, deeper into the heart of darkness. As I write this, the stranger stands by Lily's bed, his hand on her forehead. The walls tremble, and I fear what awaits us. The truth lies buried, waiting to be unearthed. And as the clock chimes midnight, I wonder if redemption is possible or if we're all destined to become whispers in the walls. The house groaned under the weight of its secrets. The stranger, now named Elias, had become a constant presence. His form flickered, half in our world and half beyond. Lily grew paler, her laughter replaced by a haunting smile. She spoke to Elias, their conversations veiled in riddles. I listened, desperate for answers. Elias's tale unfolded, a love affair that defied time. He had been a painter, his studio hidden in the attic. His muse was a woman named Evelyn, with eyes like storm clouds and a laugh that echoed through the halls. They met in secret, their love forbidden by her wealthy family. But Evelyn was drawn to the darkness in Elias's art, the way he captured shadows and whispered secrets onto canvas. One stormy night, they pledged their love beneath the gnarled tree in the garden. Elias promised to paint her portrait, capturing her essence forever. But Evelyn's family discovered their affair, and in their rage, they locked her away in the tower room. Elias waited, brush in hand, but Evelyn never returned. The house absorbed her grief, the walls weeping tears of blood. Elias's paintings changed. His once vibrant colors turned murky, twisted. Faces emerged from the shadows, Evelyn's face, twisted in agony. He painted feverishly, driven by a force beyond reason. And then, one moonless night, he vanished. The attic remained sealed, his unfinished masterpiece hidden within. Lily led me to the attic, her small hand gripping mine. The air crackled with energy, and the walls pulsed. We climbed the narrow stairs, the wood creaking under our weight. The door stood ajar, revealing a room frozen in time. Dust-covered canvases leaned against the walls, their eyes following us. And there, in the center, was Evelyn's portrait, a haunting visage, her eyes hollow, her lips parted in a silent scream. Elias materialized beside me, his touch icy. "Finish it," he whispered. "Release us both." His brush lay on the easel, waiting. I dipped it into the paint, my trembling hands guided by unseen forces. The colors flowed, Evelyn's eyes, the stormy gray, the blood-red tears. The room pulsed, the walls whispering encouragement. As the final stroke fell, the canvas trembled. Evelyn's eyes blinked, her lips moved. "Remember," she said, her voice echoing through the ages. Memories flooded my mind, Elias's kiss, the taste of rain, the scent of roses. I saw their love, their betrayal, their longing. And then, the truth, the reason Elias lingered. Evelyn's family had imprisoned her, but Elias had betrayed her. He had chosen his art over her, sacrificing their love for fame. Evelyn's heart shattered, and in her grief, she cursed him. Elias became a wanderer, seeking redemption. But he could not rest until Evelyn forgave him. I faced the canvas, my breath ragged. "Forgive him," I whispered. The room trembled, the walls closing in. And then, Evelyn's lips curved, a smile, bittersweet. "Finish it," she said. "Free us both." I painted the final stroke, and the room exploded in light. Elias and Evelyn merged, their forms intertwining. The walls wept tears of joy, and Lily's laughter filled the air. The attic vanished, leaving behind an empty space. Lily slept peacefully, her cheeks flushed. But as I descended the stairs, I felt a presence behind me. Elias's voice echoed, "Thank you." And then, silence. The house settled, its secrets buried once more. Now, as I write this, I wonder, did we save them or damn ourselves? The clock chimes midnight, and I hear whispers in the walls. Lily dreams, her laughter echoing through the house. But I know Elias and Evelyn watch, waiting for forgiveness or revenge. And so, our home remains haunted, a canvas of love and betrayal. The stranger sleeps no more, but his story lingers. I fear what awaits us, the unseen guests, the forgotten whispers. Perhaps redemption lies not in forgiveness but in the courage to face our own shadows. Hey! Subscribe for more true scary stories. Story 2. The Uninvited. Every night, the same unnerving ritual, the click of the lock, the tug to ensure the window was secure, and the whispered hope that this time, it would stay closed. But like clockwork, I'd awaken to the chill of the night air and the haunting creak of the hinges. The window was always wide open, a silent invitation to the unknown. I tried to convince myself it was just a prank, a trick of the wind, or even a fault in the old house's structure. Yet, the feeling of being watched was undeniable. The shadows seemed to cling a little too closely, forming shapes that my mind struggled to ignore. And there, just beyond the glass, the outline of someone, or something, loomed, a darker patch against the night sky. The first time I saw it, I froze, my breath caught in my throat. It was a figure, tall and still, its features obscured by the darkness. I wanted to scream, to run, but I was paralyzed, trapped in the gaze of this silent watcher. Each night, it returned, and each morning, I questioned my sanity. I began to research, poring over old records and news clippings. The house had a history, one steeped in tragedy and whispers of a curse. They spoke of a figure, a protector turned malevolent watcher, bound to the house by some unspeakable pact. It was said that once it marked you, your nights would never again be your own. Desperate, I reached out to mediums, paranormal experts, anyone who might shed light on my plight. They came, they sensed, and they left, fear tainting their words. "It's not just a ghost," they'd say. "It's something older, something angrier." Tonight, I sit, pen in hand, chronicling my story in the hope that someone will find the answers I couldn't. The lock clicks open on its own, a sound now more familiar than my heartbeat. The window swings wide, and the chill embraces me. I turn, slowly, to face the watcher, to demand answers, to reclaim my nights. But as our eyes meet, I realize the truth. The watcher isn't just here to observe. It's waiting, biding its time, and I can't help but wonder, what is it waiting for? The days blurred into nights, and the nights into a relentless cycle of dread. I couldn't escape the watcher's gaze, its eyes like twin voids, pulling me into a darkness I couldn't fathom. Sleep eluded me, replaced by the gnawing fear that clung to my bones. I sought answers in forgotten corners of the library, poring over ancient texts and crumbling manuscripts. The house whispered its secrets, the creaking floorboards, the flickering candles, the portraits with eyes that followed me. The watcher was no mere ghost, it was a manifestation of something older, something primal. The townspeople avoided my gaze, their lips sealed by generations of fear. They spoke of a pact, a bargain struck in desperation. The house had once belonged to a reclusive artist, a man who painted scenes of unspeakable horror. His obsession led him to the edge of madness, and in his darkest hour, he made a deal with the shadows. The pact was simple, immortality in exchange for his art. But immortality came with a price, the artist's soul bound to the house, forever tormented by the watcher. And now, that curse had passed to me. I was the unwitting inheritor of a legacy stained with blood and regret. I confronted the watcher one moonless night, my voice trembling as I demanded answers. "What do you want from me?" I whispered, my breath visible in the cold air. The figure remained silent, its form shifting like smoke. It had no mouth, no eyes, yet I sensed its hunger. The watcher pointed to the canvas in my studio, the one I'd been working on for weeks. The subject was a woman, her face twisted in agony, her eyes pleading for release. I'd painted her from memory, or perhaps from a dream, the details blurred, the colors bleeding into one another. But the watcher saw something I couldn't. "You seek to capture her essence," it murmured, its voice echoing in my mind. "To trap her pain within the strokes of your brush. But she is not yours to paint." I tore the canvas from the easel, my hands trembling. "Who is she?" I demanded. "Why does she haunt me?" The watcher's shadowy form shifted, elongating. "She was the artist's muse," it said. "His lover, his torment. He painted her until she faded into the canvas, her soul forever trapped. And now, he seeks to complete the cycle, to paint you, to bind your essence to the house." "Why?" I choked out. "What purpose does it serve?" The watcher leaned closer, its presence suffocating. "He feeds on your fear," it whispered. "Each stroke of your brush nourishes him. And when the canvas is complete, he will claim you as his masterpiece." I stumbled back, my mind reeling. The watcher was a conduit, a bridge between worlds. It needed me to finish the painting, to complete the cursed cycle. But I refused. I would not be a pawn in this twisted game. As dawn approached, I made my decision. I would break the pact, sever the ties that bound me to the house. But the watcher had other plans. It stepped closer, its form merging with mine. "You cannot escape," it hissed. "The artist's hunger is insatiable. And soon, you will join the gallery of lost souls." The house groaned under the weight of secrets, its walls pulsing with memories. I had little time left. The watcher's hunger grew insatiable, its shadowy form merging with mine. The canvas lay discarded, its surface marred by half-formed strokes, a testament to my defiance. I sought refuge in the attic, where dust-covered trunks held relics of the past. Among them, a brutal journal, the artist's confessions etched in faded ink. His words revealed the truth, the muse was no stranger. She was his sister, her laughter echoing through the halls before tragedy struck. A fall from the window, a broken promise, and a pact forged in desperation. The artist had painted her, capturing her essence as she slipped away. But the curse demanded more, a sacrifice to bind her soul to the house. He chose another, a young girl, innocent and unsuspecting. The girl's screams echoed through the night, her life force seeping into the brushstrokes. The watcher was born. I traced the artist's journey, following the clues to the basement, a place untouched by sunlight, where the walls whispered and the air tasted of decay. There, in the flickering candlelight, I found the final canvas, the one he'd never completed. The girl's face stared back at me, her eyes pleading for release. The Watcher materialized, its form shifting between light and shadow. "Finish it," it urged. "Complete the cycle." I hesitated, torn between duty and defiance. The artist's hunger clawed at my insides, urging me to pick up the brush. But the muse's eyes haunted me, the pain, the betrayal. She deserved peace, not eternal torment. I dipped the brush into crimson paint, my hand trembling. The canvas absorbed the color, the girl's features emerging, her lips parted in a silent scream, her eyes accusing. The Watcher leaned closer, its breath cold against my neck. "Almost there," it murmured. "One stroke, and it will be done." But I hesitated. The artist's curse had twisted love into obsession, art into madness. I couldn't perpetuate his legacy. I couldn't condemn another soul. The Watcher's patience waned. "You think you can defy fate?" it hissed. "The cycle must continue. The house demands it." I closed my eyes, the brush slipping from my fingers. "No," I whispered. "Not this time." The room trembled, the walls cracking, the floorboards splintering. The Watcher's form fractured, its essence unraveling. "You cannot escape," it spat. "The artist's hunger will consume you." But I had a plan. The attic held the artist's final masterpiece, the one he'd never shown the world. If I destroyed it, severed the link, perhaps the curse would break. As I climbed the stairs, the Watcher followed, its rage palpable. "You cannot undo what's been done," it warned. "The pact is eternal." But I had nothing left to lose. The attic door swung open, revealing the canvas, the girl's face twisted in agony, her eyes pleading for release. I raised the brush, my hand steady this time. And then, I painted over her, each stroke erasing the curse, each color reclaiming her essence. The Watcher screamed, its form dissolving into nothingness. The house trembled, its walls weeping. As the last stroke fell, the window slammed shut, the room bathed in sunlight. The curse lifted, and the muse's spirit soared, finally free. But the artist's hunger remained, a whisper in the wind. And every night, I wake to find the window wide open, the Watcher waiting. For now, I am the uninvited, bound by a pact that defies time. And so, I write this final entry, my plea to whoever finds these words. Beware the house with the open window, the Watcher awaits, hungry for souls, and it will never rest. Hey! Subscribe for more true scary stories. Story 3. The Crimson Faucet. I awoke to a chilling silence, the kind that screams louder than any cacophony. My head pounded with the rhythm of a forgotten nightmare, and as I tried to sit up, a wave of dizziness forced me back onto the pillow. The room was dim, the only light coming from the sliver of a moon peeking through the curtains. It was then I noticed a stark contrast against the white sheets, a crimson stain spreading beneath my hands. Panic clawed at my throat as I lifted my hands, the red so vivid against my skin it seemed almost surreal. I stumbled to the bathroom, the metallic scent of blood following me. Under the harsh bathroom light, I watched in horror as the water from the faucet ran clear, then slowly turned a deep, ominous red. It was as if the very pipes were bleeding. The sight was so bizarre, so impossible, that I questioned my sanity. I had no cuts, no wounds. My mind raced for an explanation, but the harder I thought, the more elusive the truth became. I was alone in my apartment, or so I thought until I heard the faintest whisper. It was like a sigh, a breath carried across the room that made the hairs on my neck stand on end. I turned slowly, half expecting to see someone behind me, but there was nothing. Just the echo of my own heartbeat filling the silence. I decided to search the apartment, every dark corner and closed door, but found nothing amiss. Yet, the feeling of being watched never left me. As the night progressed, the occurrences grew stranger. Objects moved without reason, shadows danced where light should not reach, and the air grew thick with the scent of iron. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong, that some malevolent force had invaded my home. The climax of the night came when I found myself standing before the mirror once again, the reflection not my own. It was a face twisted in anguish, eyes hollow with despair. It mouthed words I couldn't hear, a plea or perhaps a warning. And then, as quickly as it appeared, it was gone, leaving me to question if it had been there at all. I knew then that I couldn't stay, that whatever haunted me was bound to this place. As I packed a bag with trembling hands, the lights flickered, and a cold dread settled in my bones. The last thing I saw before fleeing into the night was the faucet, dripping blood that was not there before. The town of Hollowbrook was a place forgotten by time. Its streets were lined with ancient oaks, their gnarled branches reaching out like skeletal fingers. The townspeople whispered of curses and restless spirits, but I dismissed their tales as folklore until that fateful night. I rented a small cottage on the outskirts of Hollowbrook, drawn by its eerie charm. The walls bore the weight of centuries, and the floorboards creaked with secrets. The realtor had warned me about the faucet, the one in the bathroom that dripped blood, but I laughed it off. Superstitions had no place in my rational mind. Yet, as the days turned into weeks, I felt the house watching me. Shadows shifted in corners, and the air grew colder. The faucet became my nightly ritual. I'd stand before it, staring at the crimson droplets, wondering if they held answers. But they remained silent, mocking my ignorance. One moonless night, I heard the whisper again. It was a woman's voice, soft and desperate. "Help me," she pleaded. I followed the sound to the attic, where an old mirror stood covered in dust. Its glass was warped, reflecting a room that didn't exist, a room with a bed, a vanity, and a woman sitting there, her eyes hollow, her hands stained red. Her name was Evelyn, and she had lived in this very cottage a century ago. She was a healer, they said, skilled in herbs and potions. But her gift came with a price. She could see beyond the veil, into the realm of the dead. And when her husband fell ill, she made a pact with the spirits. They granted her the power to heal, but in return, she had to offer them blood. Evelyn's husband recovered, but the spirits hungered for more. She bled herself, day after day, until her veins ran dry. The walls absorbed her sacrifice, and the faucet became their conduit. The water turned red, carrying her life force to the other side. "Why?" I asked, my voice trembling. "Because they never let go," Evelyn whispered. "They crave the living. And now, they want you." I tried to leave, but the cottage held me captive. The walls closed in, the shadows thickened. The faucet dripped incessantly, and the water tasted of iron. I saw her face in the mirror, pleading, her eyes accusing. She had become a prisoner of her own gift, forever bound to this cursed place. And then, one night, as I stood before the faucet, I felt a sharp pain in my chest. My hands trembled, and blood spilled from my mouth. The spirits were taking their toll, draining me like they had drained Evelyn. I stumbled to the attic, collapsing before the mirror. Evelyn's reflection smiled, a sad, knowing smile. "You're the last," she said. "The final offering." The room blurred, and I saw her husband, still alive, his eyes haunted. He had betrayed her, sealed her fate. And now, I was the vessel, the bridge between worlds. As I write this, the walls close in, and the faucet drips relentlessly. The water is no longer red, it's black, thick like tar. I can hear them whispering, hungry for release. But I won't let them take me. I'll break the curse, even if it means sacrificing myself. The cottage became my prison, its walls closing in like the jaws of some ancient beast. The mirror in the attic held my reflection, but it was no longer mine. My eyes had lost their color, replaced by an abyss that seemed to swallow my soul. Evelyn's whispers echoed through the rooms, urging me to remember, to understand. I delved into the town's history, desperate for answers. The townspeople avoided my gaze, their eyes filled with pity. They knew the truth, the curse that bound me to this place. Hollowbrook had always been a thin veil between worlds, a place where the living and the dead brushed against each other. Evelyn had merely torn that veil wider. The moon waxed and waned, and I grew weaker. The faucet dripped incessantly, its black water staining my hands. I tried to resist, to ignore the hunger that gnawed at my insides, but the spirits demanded their due. I had become their vessel, a conduit for their malevolence. Evelyn's husband haunted my dreams. his face twisted with guilt, his eyes accusing. He had betrayed her, sealed her fate. And now, I was paying the price. The mirror whispered secrets of forbidden rituals, of blood spilled on ancient stones, of promises made in desperation. I traced the lines of the mirror, hoping to find a way out. The attic held relics, dusty books, dried herbs, and a dagger with an obsidian blade. I studied the texts, deciphering cryptic symbols and incantations. The spirits grew restless, their whispers turning into screams. They wanted release, and they would take it from me, one drop of blood at a time. I confronted Evelyn in the mirror. "Why?" I asked, my voice hoarse. "Why did you do this?" Her reflection smiled, hollow and sad. "Love," she said. "Desperation. The need to save a life. But the spirits are insatiable. They crave more than flesh, they hunger for souls. I had to break the cycle." The dagger gleamed in the moonlight, its blade sharp and hungry. I traced the symbols on my skin, chanting the incantation. The mirror trembled, and Evelyn's face contorted in agony. She pleaded, begged me to stop, but I couldn't. The spirits had taken too much. As the blade pierced my flesh, the room shook. The walls bled, and the faucet roared like a river of blood. I screamed, my voice merging with Evelyn's. The mirror shattered, shards of glass embedding themselves in my skin. The pain was exquisite, a symphony of agony and release. And then, silence. I woke up in the hospital, bandaged and disoriented. The doctors spoke of a near-fatal accident, of blood loss and hallucinations. But I knew the truth. The curse had been broken. The spirits were gone, their hunger sated. Evelyn's face haunted my memories, her sacrifice etched into my soul. I left Hollowbrook, the cottage a fading nightmare in my rearview mirror. But sometimes, when the moon is full and the night is still, I hear her whisper. She thanks me, curses me, and begs me to remember. I am the last, the final offering. And as I wash my hands, the water turns red, as if it were bleeding too. Story 4. The Unseen Guests. I had always believed our love was unbreakable, a bond that could withstand any storm. But as I watched my wife, Alara, pace the room, her eyes clouded with a fear I couldn't comprehend, I felt that bond fraying. It had been a week since she returned from her business trip, a week of hushed whispers and sleepless nights. She spoke of the others with a tremor in her voice, a term she never explained, but which filled me with an inexplicable dread. Our home, once a sanctuary, now felt oppressive, as if the walls themselves were closing in. Alara's behavior grew increasingly erratic. She would flinch at the slightest sound and mutter to empty corners. I tried to reach out to her, to understand what haunted her so, but she pushed me away, insisting I wouldn't believe her if she told me. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the living room, Alara turned to me, her eyes wide with terror. "They're here," she whispered, her voice barely audible. I followed her gaze to the window, but saw nothing beyond the glass. Yet, the air grew colder, and I felt the unmistakable sensation of being watched. As night enveloped our home, the atmosphere thickened with an unspoken promise of dread. I awoke from a fitful sleep to the sound of Alara's voice, not speaking, but chanting in a language I didn't recognize. The words were guttural, ancient, and they seemed to resonate with the very foundation of our house. I found her in the attic, surrounded by old photographs and trinkets from our travels. She didn't notice my presence, her eyes fixed on a dusty mirror propped against the wall. I approached her, my heart pounding, and as I drew closer, I saw something in the mirror that chilled me to the bone. There were figures standing behind us, their forms blurry and indistinct, but undeniably there. Before I could react, Alara turned to me, her expression one of sorrow and fear. "They've been waiting," she said, her voice breaking. "And now, they're coming for us." The temperature dropped further, and the figures in the mirror began to move, their whispers growing louder, as if they were closing in. I reached for Alara, desperate to pull her away from the mirror, from the phantoms that seemed all too real. But as my fingers brushed her arm, the world went dark, and the last thing I heard was the sound of the mirror shattering. The shards of the mirror lay scattered on the attic floor, their jagged edges reflecting the dim light like broken memories. Alara stood frozen, her eyes wide, as if she had glimpsed something beyond the veil of our reality. The figures in the mirror had vanished, but their presence lingered, like a stain on our souls. I tried to piece together what Alara had said, the cryptic warnings, the unseen guests. But my mind rebelled against the impossible. Ghosts? Spirits? It was absurd, the stuff of horror movies and campfire tales. Yet, the chill in the air, the oppressive weight of their gaze, it was all too real. Alara retreated from the shattered mirror, her fingers trembling. "They're here," she whispered again, her voice barely audible. "They've always been here, watching, waiting." Her eyes bore into mine, pleading for understanding. "We're not alone, love. They're among us, slipping through the cracks of our world." I wanted to dismiss her words, to wrap her in my arms and assure her that it was all in her mind. But the house seemed to hold its breath, as if it, too, sensed the intruders. Shadows danced along the walls, elongating into twisted forms. I followed Alara downstairs, where the air grew thicker, suffused with an otherworldly scent, a mix of decay and ancient secrets. In the kitchen, Alara traced her fingers over the old oak table, her touch reverent. "This house," she said, her voice distant, "it was built upon their resting place. The land remembers, even if we forget." Her eyes held mine, and I saw the weight of generations, the lives lived and lost within these walls. "Why now?" I asked, my voice hoarse. "Why reveal themselves after all these years?" Alara's gaze shifted to the window, where rain tapped against the glass. "I think they're hungry," she said. "Hungry for the living, for the warmth of our souls. They feed on our fear, our doubt." She reached for my hand, her grip desperate. "We have to leave, before they consume us whole." But leaving felt like abandoning a sinking ship. Our memories were etched into every corner, the laughter, the tears, the promises whispered in the dead of night. I couldn't let go, not yet. Instead, I searched for answers, scouring old journals, dusty books, and forgotten legends. The truth emerged like a slow poison. The others were bound to this house, their existence tethered to ours. They hungered for release, for a way to cross over. Alara, unwittingly, had become their conduit. Her business trip had taken her to an ancient site, a place where the veil between worlds was thin. She had brought them back with her, their whispers echoing in her mind. As the nights wore on, the house groaned with unseen footsteps. Alara's eyes grew darker, her skin translucent. She spoke to them, pleaded with them to spare us. But their hunger was insatiable. They whispered secrets of forgotten rituals, of sacrifices made long ago. And with each passing day, Alara faded, her life force draining into the void. I stood by her bedside, watching her slip away. "I love you," I whispered, my tears falling onto her cold hand. "I won't let them take you." But the mirror had shown me their faces, the hollow eyes, the hunger. And as Alara's breaths grew shallower, I heard their voices, a chorus of longing. They were coming, drawn by her fading light. And when they arrived, they would take her, body and soul. Alara's breaths grew fainter, her body a mere vessel for the unseen guests. I sat by her side, my fingers entwined with hers, as if our touch could anchor her to this world. The house had become a battleground, the living versus the spectral, our love caught in the crossfire. The whispers intensified, their words like shards of ice. They spoke of forgotten rituals, of blood spilled on ancient stones. Alara's eyes fluttered open, and for a moment, I saw her, the woman I had married, the one who laughed at my terrible jokes and danced with me in the rain. But then the darkness returned, and she spoke in a voice that wasn't hers. "They're here," she said, her gaze fixed on the ceiling. "The others. They hunger." Her lips curved into a smile that chilled me to my core. "They want to taste life again." I had read about possession, about malevolent spirits seeking refuge in mortal bodies. But this was Alara, the woman who loved sunflowers and hated olives. She had become a conduit, a bridge between worlds, and I wondered if there was any part of her left. The clock struck midnight, and the house trembled. Shadows danced along the walls, elongating into twisted forms. The mirror, still shattered, reflected nothing but darkness. Alara's grip tightened, her nails digging into my skin. "They're close," she whispered. "Can't you hear them?" And then I did, the faintest rustle, like leaves in a graveyard. They were here, the others, drawn by Alara's fading light. I stood, my legs trembling, and faced the mirror. Their faces materialized, one with hollow eyes, another with a twisted grin. They reached out, their fingers brushing the glass, and I felt their hunger. "Take me," Alara said, her voice distant. "End this." But I couldn't. Not yet. I had one chance, one desperate gamble. I grabbed the mirror, its edges sharp against my palms, and whispered the words from Alara's journal, the forgotten incantation that bound them to this house. The mirror trembled, and the figures wailed, their forms flickering. "Release us," they pleaded. "We've waited too long." I closed my eyes, my heart pounding. "Not her," I said. "Take me instead." The mirror shattered, and the room filled with blinding light. I felt their icy touch, their hunger consuming me. And then, silence. When I opened my eyes, Alara lay still, her chest rising and falling. But her eyes were clear, her smile genuine. "They're gone," she said. "You saved us." I held her, tears streaming down my face. "But at what cost?" She kissed my forehead. "Love," she said, "is a sacrifice. We'll rebuild, find a new home. And maybe, just maybe, we'll forget." But as I looked at the shattered mirror, I knew we never would. The others were out there, waiting, hungering. And one day, they would return. Story 5. The Lurking Shade. Every night, the silence of my room is thick, suffocating, like the air itself is holding its breath. As I lie in bed, the shadows seem to creep closer, the corners of the room growing darker, more insistent. I close my eyes, and there it is, the figure, a silhouette etched against the backdrop of my eyelids, standing at the edge of my bed. It's featureless, yet its presence is overwhelming, a pressure on my chest that makes it hard to breathe. I tell myself it's just a trick of the mind, a shadow play from a life spent devouring horror stories. But the figure feels real, its energy, a silent scream that resonates in the hollows of my room. I open my eyes, and for a moment, it's gone. But the relief is short-lived. Each time I blink, it returns, inching closer, its form becoming more defined, more menacing. The nights are a battle, a war between the need for sleep and the fear of what comes with it. My friends say it's stress, a figment of an overworked mind. But they don't see the figure, they don't feel its gaze, cold and unyielding, tracking my every move. Tonight, I've decided to confront it. As the clock ticks towards the witching hour, I steel my nerves. The room is quiet, too quiet, as if it's waiting for something to happen. I close my eyes, and there it is. I can almost hear a whisper, a hiss of words that slithers into my ears, soon. I snap my eyes open, and my heart stops. It's closer than ever before, almost within reach. I can see the faint outline of what seems like a hand, reaching out to me. I want to scream, to run, but I'm paralyzed, trapped in a body that refuses to obey. The figure is a riddle, a puzzle that my mind can't solve. Why is it here? What does it want? The questions swirl in my head, a maelstrom of doubt and fear. I've researched, scoured the internet for answers, but nothing comes close to explaining the terror that visits me each night. As dawn approaches, the figure recedes, but it leaves a parting gift, a cold spot on the floor where it stood, a tangible proof of its visit. I know tonight will be different, the figure's message was clear. Soon. But soon what? The question haunts me as I prepare for the night ahead, the night when I'll finally learn the truth. The days blur into one another, a monotonous cycle of dread. I've tried everything, salt lines, sage smudging, even calling in a priest to bless the room. But the figure remains, its presence growing more oppressive with each passing night. I've named it the Silent Watcher. It stands there, just beyond the foot of my bed, its form flickering like a faulty light bulb. I've tried to capture it on camera, but the photos come out blurry, distorted, as if the very fabric of reality rebels against its existence. My sleep is fractured, a series of short naps punctuated by waking nightmares. The figure never moves, never speaks. It just watches. Its eyes, or what I assume are eyes, glow faintly, like dying embers. I've tried to reason with it, to ask what it wants, but my voice fails me. Fear clamps down on my throat, choking off any words. The nights have become a game of endurance. I lie there, eyes wide open, waiting for the inevitable. The figure inches closer, its shadow elongating across the floor. I can feel its gaze, cold and unyielding, boring into my soul. What does it want? Why me? I've researched ancient texts, desperate for answers. The Silent Watcher fits no known category, neither ghost nor demon. It's something else, something older, hungrier. I've read about curses, about entities that feed off fear. But this feels personal, as if it knows me, as if it's been waiting for this moment. Last night, I tried to confront it. I whispered, "What do you want?" The figure tilted its head, and for a split second, I saw something, a flicker of sadness, of longing. But then it retreated, fading into the darkness. I was left trembling, my skin prickling with goosebumps. I've barricaded the door, piled books against the windows. But the figure defies physics, slipping through the cracks, insinuating itself into my reality. I've stopped telling my friends, they'd think I'm insane. Instead, I've turned to the internet, to forums where people share their own encounters with the inexplicable. And there it is, the Silent Watcher, described in hushed tones, a common thread connecting disparate stories. Some say it's a harbinger of death, others a guardian of secrets. But no one has survived its presence for long. They vanish, leaving behind empty rooms, their essence absorbed by the figure. As the clock ticks toward midnight, I brace myself. Tonight, I'll ask again. Tonight, I'll demand answers. But deep down, I know, I'm playing a dangerous game. The figure is patient, ancient. And every time I close my eyes, it's a little closer. The nights blur together, a tapestry of dread woven with threads of fear. The Silent Watcher has become my constant companion, its presence no longer confined to the darkness. It haunts my waking hours too, lurking at the periphery of my vision, a shadow that refuses to be ignored. I've stopped going to work, stopped seeing friends. My life has narrowed to this room, this bed, this relentless gaze. The figure has grown bolder, its form more defined. I've tried to capture it on video, but the camera malfunctions, the footage a jumble of static and distortion. I've become obsessed with its origins. I've scoured old newspapers, dusty archives, searching for any hint of a similar encounter. But the Silent Watcher remains elusive, a phantom that defies explanation. I've even considered hiring a psychic, someone who can bridge the gap between the living and the dead. Last night, I dreamt of a house, a crumbling mansion on the outskirts of town. The walls whispered secrets, the floorboards creaked under invisible weight. And there it was, the Silent Watcher, standing in the grand hallway, its eyes fixed on me. I woke up drenched in sweat, my heart pounding. I've decided to visit the house. It's irrational, desperate. But I can't shake the feeling that the answers lie within those decaying walls. As I step through the overgrown garden, the air thickens, the world blurring at the edges. The house looms, its windows like empty sockets, its doors yawning wide. Inside, the silence is oppressive. Dust motes dance in the slivers of light that pierce the gloom. The floorboards groan under my weight, as if protesting my intrusion. I climb the grand staircase, each step echoing with my heartbeat. And there it is, the Silent Watcher, waiting at the top, its form flickering like a dying candle. I approach, my breath ragged. "Who are you?" I whisper. The figure tilts its head, and for the first time, I see a hint of recognition. It reaches out, and I feel a surge of energy, a memory, not mine, but someone else's. A woman, desperate, pleading. She had summoned the Silent Watcher, seeking vengeance for a lost love. The figure was her creation, a curse born of grief and rage. But it hungered, fed on her fear until it consumed her. She vanished, leaving behind only whispers, a legend passed down through generations. And now, it's my turn. The Silent Watcher wants release, wants to be free of its eternal vigil. I close my eyes, and the memories flood in, her pain, her longing. I see her face, twisted in anguish. And I understand, I'm the conduit, the vessel. The figure wants me to take its place, to become the Silent Watcher. But I refuse. I won't be consumed, won't vanish into the void. As I open my eyes, the figure is gone. But the room is colder, emptier. The curse lingers, a weight on my soul. I know what I must do. Tonight, I'll confront it one last time. I'll break the cycle, sever the connection. And maybe, just maybe, I'll find peace. But as the clock ticks toward midnight, I wonder, is there truly an escape? Or will I become another whisper, another legend, lost to the Silent Watcher? Story 6. The Discovery. I always knew our new Victorian house held secrets in its ancient walls, but nothing prepared me for the chilling discovery in the basement. It began as a mundane Sunday, with the rain tapping rhythmically against the window panes. I decided to explore the basement, which we had largely ignored since moving in. As I descended the creaky stairs, a musty smell enveloped me, the kind that whispered of long-forgotten things. The basement was cluttered with the previous owner's belongings, but in the corner, I noticed an oddity, a wall that seemed out of place. Curiosity piqued, I pushed aside boxes and cobwebs to reveal a small, concealed door, cleverly hidden within the wall's design. My heart raced as I contemplated the door's existence. It wasn't on the blueprints, it wasn't supposed to be here. With trembling hands, I opened the door to reveal a room shrouded in darkness. A flick of the light switch unveiled a sight so macabre, it sent shivers down my spine. Dolls. Dozens of them, all seated around a miniature wooden table, their glassy eyes reflecting the dim light. But it was their faces that horrified me. They were replicas of my family, each detail meticulously crafted, and their eyes were sewn shut with crude, black stitches. I stumbled back, gasping for air, my mind reeling from the grotesque tableau. Who had created these dolls, and why? As I turned to leave, a soft whisper caressed my ear, "Stay with us." I spun around, but the room was empty, save for the eerie congregation of dolls. Was it my imagination, or was something sinister at play? The days that followed were plagued with unexplainable occurrences. Shadows danced in the corners of my vision, and whispers echoed through the halls at night. My family laughed off my concerns, attributing them to the stress of the move. But I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched, that the dolls in the basement were somehow alive. One evening, as dusk settled, I heard a faint melody drifting from the basement. It was a lullaby, one my mother used to sing. I was alone in the house, or so I thought. Compelled by a force I couldn't resist, I found myself standing before the hidden room once more. The door creaked open on its own, inviting me in. As I stepped inside, the lullaby grew louder, and the dolls turned their sewn-shut eyes towards me. A cold dread filled my heart as I realized the lullaby was not coming from the dolls, but from something much darker, lurking in the shadows of the room. And then, everything went black. The dolls haunted my dreams. Their glassy eyes, sewn shut with black thread, followed me wherever I went. I tried to ignore them, but their presence gnawed at my sanity. My family dismissed my fears, chalking it up to stress and fatigue. But I knew better. The hidden room held secrets, and I was determined to unravel them. I researched the house's history, digging through dusty archives and yellowed newspapers. The previous owner, an eccentric artist named Evelyn Hart, had vanished without a trace. Rumors whispered of her obsession with dolls, how she believed they held the souls of lost loved ones. The resemblance between the dolls and my family was uncanny, too uncanny to be coincidental. One night, unable to sleep, I descended into the basement once more. The dolls sat frozen, their stitched eyes fixed on me. I reached out to touch one, a porcelain replica of my daughter, Lily. As my fingers grazed her cold cheek, I heard a voice, soft as a sigh, "They see what you cannot." The room pulsed with energy, a malevolence that clawed at my mind. I traced the stitches across Lily's eyelids, wondering what horrors she had witnessed. The other dolls seemed equally aware, their expressions frozen in silent agony. Why had Evelyn created them? And why did they resemble my family? Days blurred into weeks as I delved deeper. I discovered that Evelyn had lost her own daughter, Emily, in a tragic accident. Desperate to reunite with her child, she turned to forbidden rituals, stitching together these cursed dolls. But something went wrong, their eyes remained shut, trapping their souls in eternal darkness. My wife, Sarah, grew distant, her once vibrant eyes now haunted. She avoided the basement, sensing the malevolence that clung to the dolls. I couldn't blame her, I felt it too. The house groaned with secrets, its walls whispering of forgotten tragedies. I wondered if Evelyn's obsession had consumed her, if she had become one with the dolls. Late one night, I heard Lily's voice from the basement. She sang the same lullaby I'd heard before, the one Evelyn had stitched into their very fabric. I followed the melody, descending into the hidden room. The dolls sat in a circle, their eyes still shut, but their mouths moved in sync with Lily's song. As the lullaby reached its haunting crescendo, the room trembled. The walls cracked, revealing ancient symbols etched into the stone. I understood then, the dolls were a conduit, a bridge between worlds. Evelyn had sacrificed herself to bind their souls, hoping to glimpse her daughter once more. But the price was steep, the dolls hungered for new souls, and my family was their unwitting prey. I stumbled back, my mind unraveling. The dolls' eyes remained shut, but I sensed their hunger, their need to see. I had to find a way to break the curse, to free my family from their stitched gaze. But as I climbed the basement stairs, I heard Lily's voice again, pleading, "Stay with us." The dolls' whispers grew louder, their stitched eyes pleading for release. I couldn't escape their gaze, even when I closed my own eyes. My family remained blissfully unaware, but I knew the truth, the dolls hungered for souls, and they had chosen us. I delved deeper into Evelyn's past, desperate for answers. The local archives revealed a chilling tale. Evelyn's daughter, Emily, had vanished on a stormy night, her body never found. The townsfolk whispered of a curse, of a grieving mother who turned to forbidden magic. Evelyn's obsession with dolls had led her to the hidden room, where she performed a binding ritual, a desperate attempt to reunite with Emily. The ritual required a sacrifice, a soul to bridge the gap between worlds. Evelyn chose her own, stitching her eyes shut as she whispered incantations. The dolls became vessels, their porcelain forms infused with Emily's essence. But something went wrong, their eyes remained closed, trapping them in a half-life. And now, they hungered for more. I confronted Sarah, my wife, about the dolls. She laughed it off, dismissing my fears as paranoia. But her eyes held a distant look, as if memories clawed at her mind. I knew she had seen them too, the dolls, their eyes sewn shut, whispering secrets only she could hear. One night, as the moon hung low, I descended into the basement. The dolls awaited me, their silence pregnant with anticipation. I studied their faces, their stitched mouths seemed to move, forming words I couldn't hear. I wondered if Evelyn's soul lingered among them, if she watched from the shadows. Lily, my daughter, had changed. Her laughter turned hollow, her eyes distant. She spent hours in the basement, talking to the dolls. I listened outside the door, straining to decipher their conversations. They spoke of longing, of lost memories, of a hunger that could never be sated. I researched the binding ritual, desperate for a way to break the curse. The solution lay within the dolls themselves, their eyes, sewn shut, held the key. I needed to undo Evelyn's work, to unbind their souls. But the ritual required a sacrifice, one that would sever the connection forever. I confronted Lily's doll, her porcelain face devoid of emotion. "You're not my daughter," I whispered. "You're a vessel." She tilted her head, her stitched eyes unyielding. "Stay with us," she murmured. The room trembled, the walls cracking further. The doll's whispers merged into a cacophony, urging me to choose. I made my decision. I would sacrifice myself, sever the link between worlds. As I stitched my own eyes shut, I felt the room shift, the boundary between life and death thinning. The dolls watched, their porcelain forms quivering. I whispered the incantation, my blood mingling with the thread. The room erupted, a vortex of light and shadow. The doll's eyes snapped open, their gazes piercing my soul. I glimpsed Emily, her spirit trapped within them. She smiled, her eyes no longer sewn shut. "Thank you," she whispered, and then I was falling, spiraling into darkness. Now, as I record this, my eyes remain closed. I am one with the dolls, bound by the same curse. My family lives above, oblivious to my sacrifice. But sometimes, when the wind howls through the eaves, they hear my lullaby, the same one Evelyn sang to Emily. And they know, I am still here, watching, waiting. The hidden room remains, its secrets intact. The dolls hunger, their eyes wide open, seeking new souls. Beware the house with the concealed basement, for within its walls, the line between life and death blurs. The dolls stitch their stories into eternity. Story 7. The Sinister Smile. I always believed mirrors held a piece of truth that the world couldn't see. But lately, the truth has become a twisted game. It started subtly, the way shadows creep across the walls at dusk, unnoticed until darkness swallows the room. My husband, Ethan, has never been one for vanity, but his reflection has taken on a life of its own. It began one evening as we prepared for bed. I caught a glimpse of his reflection in the bathroom mirror. It was smiling, a cold, calculating smile that never reached his eyes. I blinked, and it was gone. I told myself it was fatigue, a trick of the light. But the seed of unease was planted. Days passed, and the reflection grew bolder. It no longer waited for my fleeting glances. It moved when Ethan was still, its gestures mocking, its eyes following me with an intelligence that shouldn't exist in a pane of glass. I tried to speak to Ethan about it, but how do you tell someone their reflection is betraying them? He laughed it off, the sound hollow against the backdrop of my growing fear. The reflection's independence became more pronounced. One morning, as Ethan brushed his teeth, his reflection turned to me, its finger pressed to where its lips would be, commanding silence. Ethan saw nothing, but I was frozen, a scream clawing at my throat. Tonight, the reflection crossed a line. As Ethan slept, I watched it stand in the mirror, its movements no longer mimicking his. It was exploring, testing the boundaries of its glass prison. And then, it looked directly at me, its smile wide and malicious, and whispered my name. I'm writing this now because I fear what comes next. The reflection isn't just a reflection anymore. It's something else, something alive. And it knows I can see it. The reflection's malevolence grew with each passing day. It no longer confined itself to the bathroom mirror. It appeared in the hallway, in the antique mirror above the fireplace, even in the polished surface of our kitchen knives. Its smile was a constant presence, a reminder that something had crossed over from the other side. Ethan remained blissfully unaware. He went about his routine, oblivious to the sinister doppelganger that shadowed him. I watched as the reflection whispered secrets to him, secrets that made his eyes widen with fear before he dismissed them as mere figments of imagination. I tried to capture evidence, photos, videos, but the reflection was elusive. It knew when I was watching, and it retreated into the glass, leaving Ethan's reflection innocent and unassuming. I felt like a detective chasing a phantom, my sanity fraying at the edges. One night, I woke to find Ethan standing by the bedroom window, staring out into the moonlit garden. His reflection stood beside him, its fingers tracing patterns on the glass. I strained to hear their conversation, but their voices were hushed, carried away by the wind. The reflection's smile widened, revealing teeth that seemed too sharp for a mere reflection. It beckoned to me, and I stepped closer, my heart pounding. "What do you want?" I whispered. Its voice echoed in my mind, a chorus of whispers. "To be free," it said. to step out of the mirror and taste life. "Why Ethan?" I asked. "Why my husband?" "Because he's weak," it replied. "His soul is a fragile vessel, and I can break it." I stumbled back, horror gripping my chest. The reflection's intentions were clear. It wanted to replace Ethan, to wear his skin like a disguise. And it needed my help. I had to find a way to stop it. But how do you fight something that exists between worlds? I researched ancient rituals, desperate for answers. The mirror had become a portal, a gateway to a realm beyond our understanding. As dawn approached, I made my decision. I would confront the reflection, force it back into the glass. But when I returned to the bedroom, Ethan was gone. Only the reflection remained, its smile triumphant. And then it spoke, using Ethan's voice. "You should have chosen better, my dear." The house felt different after Ethan disappeared. The air was thick with anticipation, as if the walls themselves held their breath. I wandered from room to room, searching for any sign of him. But it was the mirror that drew me, the cursed mirror that had become a portal to something beyond comprehension. The reflection awaited me, its smile now a rictus of hunger. "He's with us," it whispered. "In the in-between." "What do you want?" I demanded, my voice trembling. "Why Ethan?" The reflection's eyes glowed with malevolence. "He was an easy vessel," it said. "His doubts, his fears, they made him susceptible. But you, my dear, you're different." I clenched my fists. "What do you mean?" "You see the truth," it replied. "You've glimpsed the other side. You know what lies beyond the glass." I remembered the ancient rituals, the salt circles, the whispered incantations. But the reflection was no longer contained. It had tasted freedom, and it hungered for more. "You can't have me," I said. "I won't let you." The reflection laughed, a sound that echoed through the room. "You think you have a choice? We are bound now, you and I. The mirror is our tether." I studied the glass, its surface fractured like a spider's web. "How do I break it?" "Ah, the price," it said. "There's always a price. You must give up something precious, something that binds you to this world." I thought of Ethan, lost in the in-between. "Take me," I said. "Release him." The reflection's smile widened. "Very well." It stepped out of the mirror, its form shifting, becoming corporeal. I felt its icy touch on my skin, its fingers tracing my veins. And then it whispered its name, a name that shattered my resolve. "Mara," it said. "I am the reflection of all your fears." The room spun, reality folding in on itself. I glimpsed Ethan, his eyes pleading, before he vanished into the fractured glass. And now, I stand here, my reflection no longer my own. Mara smiles back at me, her eyes hungry, her fingers tracing patterns on the mirror. She whispers secrets, and I listen, knowing that the in-between awaits. Story 8. The Watcher in the Corner. Every night, as the clock chimed 12, my dog Max's barking would pierce the silence of our old house. His fierce growls were directed at the empty corner of the living room, a space so devoid of life it seemed to absorb the very light around it. I had always dismissed it as a quirk of his, a strange habit with no reason behind it. That was until last night. The moon hung heavy in the sky, a pale witness to the night's eerie calm. Max's barks grew more desperate, more urgent. I tried to calm him, but his eyes were fixated on that corner, his body tense and ready to pounce. It was then that I saw them, two glowing orbs floating in the darkness, watching us with an intensity that felt almost personal. I froze, my heart pounding against my ribs like a frantic prisoner seeking escape. The eyes blinked once, slowly, and a shiver ran down my spine. Max continued to bark, but there was a protective quality to it now, as if he was standing guard over me. The eyes began to move, gliding upwards until they were level with my own. I could feel their gaze, cold and calculating, weighing my very soul. The air grew thick, charged with a static that made the hairs on my arms stand on end. A voice, barely more than a whisper, filled the room. "You can see me," it said, a statement rather than a question. I couldn't respond, couldn't form the words as fear gripped my throat. Max's barks turned to whines, and he pressed close to my legs, his usual bravado gone. The eyes drew closer, and I could make out a faint outline of a figure, ethereal and shifting. It was as if the darkness itself had taken form, a shadow within shadows. "Why now?" I managed to croak, my voice sounding foreign to my own ears. The figure chuckled, a sound that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. "Because you're ready," it replied, its voice a melodic hum that resonated with the very walls of the house. "Ready for what?" I asked, but the figure had begun to fade, the eyes dimming until they were nothing but a memory. Max whimpered, nudging my hand with his nose. I looked down at him, seeking comfort in his familiar presence. But as I glanced back at the corner, I realized it wasn't empty anymore. There, in the faint moonlight, stood a faded photograph of a woman I had never seen before, her eyes just as intense as the ones that had vanished into the night. The photograph haunted me. Its edges were frayed, the sepia tones faded with time. The woman's eyes bore into mine, as if she knew my every secret. I searched the attic, the basement, even the dusty old library in town, but there was no record of her existence. No birth certificate, no marriage license, nothing. Max continued to bark at the corner, his eyes never leaving the photograph. I wondered if he saw her too, if he sensed the same otherworldly presence that had invaded our home. The nights grew colder, the air thick with anticipation. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat. The woman's eyes followed me, even when I closed my own. I began to research, desperate for answers. The local historian, Mrs. Abernathy, had lived in this town for decades. She knew every tale, every legend. When I showed her the photograph, her eyes widened. "The Watcher," she whispered, her voice trembling. "You've seen the Watcher." I pressed her for more information, but she clammed up, refusing to say another word. She handed me an old leather-bound book, its pages brittle and yellowed. "Read this," she said. "It might help." The book was filled with accounts of the Watcher, a guardian spirit, they called her. She appeared to those in need, those who were lost or in danger. But there was a price. The Watcher demanded a sacrifice, a soul to keep her company in the shadows. Those who refused were haunted until they gave in, their lives unraveling like a frayed tapestry. I couldn't tear my eyes away from the pages. The stories were eerily similar, people driven to madness, their screams echoing through the night. And always, the eyes, the glowing orbs that watched, waited. I thought of Max, his loyalty unwavering. Was he my protector or my downfall? The Watcher visited me again, her form shifting from shadow to substance. "You seek answers," she murmured, her voice like wine through ancient trees. "But you already know them. The sacrifice must be made." I shook my head, my resolve hardening. "I won't give in," I said. "Not for myself, not for Max." She laughed, a sound that chilled my bones. "You think it's about you," she said. "I feed on love, on devotion. Max is your weakness, your heart. He will be the one to pay." I clutched the photograph, my fingers trembling. "What do you want from me?" I yelled. The Watcher leaned closer, her eyes burning into mine. "A choice," she said. "Your soul or his. Decide." The Watcher's words echoed in my mind, a haunting refrain. My soul or Max's. The choice was impossible, yet I knew it had to be made. I couldn't let Max suffer for my curiosity, for my refusal to accept the supernatural. I spent days poring over the old book, seeking loopholes, hidden clues. The Watcher remained silent, her eyes watching from the corner. Max grew weaker, his barks fading to feeble whimpers. I couldn't bear to see him suffer, but I couldn't bear to lose him either. One night, as the moon hung low, I sat by the fireplace, the photograph cradled in my hands. The flames danced, casting shadows on the walls. "What do you want?" I whispered to the Watcher. "Why Max?" She appeared, her form flickering like a dying candle. "He is your heart," she said. "His loyalty sustains me." but I hunger for more. I clenched my fists. What if I offer myself? I asked. My soul for his. The watcher tilted her head, her eyes narrowing. A tempting offer, she said. But it won't be enough. I crave love, devotion, the very essence of life. I thought of Max, his eyes filled with trust even now. What if I find another? I said. Someone who loves me, who would willingly sacrifice for me. The watcher's laughter sent shivers down my spine. You think love can be manufactured, she said. No, it must be genuine, pure. I had no choice. I scoured the town, seeking someone, anyone, who would love me enough to give their soul. But love was elusive, a fragile thing that slipped through my fingers like sand. The nights grew colder, Max's breath shallower. I was running out of time. Then, in the darkest hour, I found her, a woman with eyes like the watcher's, haunted and wise. She had lost her family, her purpose. I'll do it, she said, her voice steady. For love. I hesitated, torn between gratitude and guilt. Are you sure? I asked. She nodded. Love is worth the sacrifice, she said. Even if it means becoming like her. We stood in the living room, the watcher watching. The woman closed her eyes, her breath slowing. Take me, she whispered. The watcher stepped forward, her form merging with the woman's. The room trembled, the walls cracking. And then, in a burst of light, they were gone. Max lay at my feet, his eyes dimming. Thank you, I whispered, tears streaming down my face. For loving me. But the watcher was not satisfied. Her eyes glowed brighter, her form solidifying. One more, she said. One more soul. I looked at Max, my heart breaking. No, I said. Not him. The watcher's laughter filled the room. Not him, she agreed. You. And so, as the clock chimed midnight, I made my choice. My soul for Max's. The room blurred, reality shifting. And then, darkness. Story 9. The Whispering Doppelganger. I had always been fascinated by the unexplained, those thin veils between reality and the supernatural that most people dare not touch. But nothing could have prepared me for the day a peculiar package arrived at my doorstep. Wrapped in brown paper, it bore no return address, only my name scribbled in a hasty scrawl. Inside was a doll, a spitting image of myself, down to the very last freckle. Its glassy eyes held a depth that seemed almost sentient. As night fell, the house grew quiet, but the silence was deceptive. I could hear it, the faintest whisper, like a secret meant only for me. The doll's lips never moved, yet I felt its presence looming larger with each passing hour. It was as if it watched me, its gaze unyielding and ever-present. I tried to dismiss it as a trick of the mind, the product of an overactive imagination fueled by too many horror stories. But then, things began to move. Objects misplaced, doors ajar, and that incessant whispering, growing louder, calling my name in the dead of night. I sought answers, delving into the doll's origins. I scoured the internet, consulted collectors, even dabbled in forums for the paranormally inclined. No one had seen anything like it. It was as if the doll had materialized from thin air, a ghostly artifact with no past and an insidious purpose. The whispers became conversations, the doll's voice a sibilant hiss that filled my dreams with nightmares. It spoke of dark things, of shadows and specters that lurked just beyond the veil. It promised secrets, knowledge of the unknown, but at a price I feared to pay. Tonight, I sit writing this, the doll across the room. Its eyes are on me, unblinking, and the whispers have grown into a cacophony that drowns out all reason. I fear sleep, for it is in dreams that it holds the most power. I am trapped in this waking nightmare, and I dread what might come when the sun sets once more. The doll's presence consumed my every waking moment. Its eyes, those unblinking orbs, bore into my soul. I tried to hide it, to lock it away in the attic, but it always found its way back. The whispers grew louder, more insistent, as if the doll hungered for something beyond my understanding. My reflection in the mirror became distorted. The lines blurred between me and the doll. Was it a doppelganger? A harbinger of doom? I couldn't tear my gaze away from its porcelain face. It knew my secrets, the ones I dared not utter aloud. And it reveled in my fear. The house itself seemed to shift. Shadows lengthened, walls creaked, and the air grew colder. I heard footsteps in the hallway, but when I investigated, no one was there. The doll sat on the windowsill, moonlight casting eerie shadows across its features. It whispered my name, syllables drawn out like a curse. Sleep eluded me. Each night, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, waiting for the whispers to begin. They spoke of forgotten sins, of promises broken, of a debt that must be paid. I wondered if the doll was a conduit for something darker, a malevolence that had latched onto me. I sought help. Paranormal investigators, priests, even skeptics who scoffed at my tale. They examined the doll, ran tests, but found nothing. The whispers mocked them, weaving through their minds until they questioned their own sanity. The doll was a master manipulator, a puppeteer pulling invisible strings. And then, one stormy night, it moved. I woke to find it perched on my chest, its tiny fingers pressing against my throat. The whispers crescendoed, a chorus of malevolence. I gasped for air, struggling against its weight. The doll's eyes glowed, and I glimpsed something beyond, something ancient and hungry. I managed to fling it across the room, but it returned, relentless. I fled, stumbling down the stairs, the doll hot on my heels. Lightning illuminated its face, revealing a twisted grin. It wanted me to suffer, to pay the price for whatever transgressions had brought it into my life. As I write this, I know the doll is waiting. It sits on the edge of my bed, watching me with those unblinking eyes. The whispers have become screams, and I fear what comes next. My reflection in the mirror no longer resembles me, it's a fractured version, a vessel for something far more sinister. Story 10. The Lost Twin. I always believed our home was a sanctuary, a place where laughter and warmth filled the air. But lately, it's become a breeding ground for whispers and shadows. My wife, Clara, insists that our son, Jacob, has a twin brother named Ethan, who died at birth. She speaks to Ethan, sets a place for him at dinner, and even buys him clothes. Her conviction is so strong that it's starting to fray the edges of my reality. Each night, as I tuck Jacob into bed, I feel a chill that doesn't belong in our cozy nursery. The room seems to sigh with a sadness that I can't explain. Clara says it's Ethan's way of staying close to us. I've tried to reason with her, to show her the birth records, but she just smiles and tells me that some things transcend paperwork and proof. The first time I heard it, the soft giggle from the empty corner of the room, I told myself it was just the house settling. But then, it happened again, a whisper so clear it made my heart stop. "Daddy," it said, and I turned to find Jacob sound asleep. Was my mind playing tricks, or was Clara right all along? I decided to investigate, to delve into the hospital archives myself. There was no record of Ethan, no paper trail of a second child. Yet, the nursery toys would sometimes move on their own, and I'd catch glimpses of a small figure darting just out of sight. It was becoming harder to dismiss Clara's beliefs as mere grief. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky a melancholic orange, I saw it. A little boy, identical to Jacob, standing at the foot of our bed. He was there one moment and gone the next, leaving behind a cold spot and the faint scent of baby powder. The days grew shorter, the nights longer, and with each passing hour, the presence of the unseen twin grew stronger. Clara seemed more distant, lost in a world where Ethan was as real as the sun we could both see and touch. I began to dread the coming darkness, the time when the veil between here and there grew thin. The whispers grew louder, insistent. I'd wake in the dead of night, my breath caught in my throat, as if someone were pressing a cold hand against my chest. Clara slept soundly beside me, oblivious to the unseen twin who haunted our home. I tried to ignore it, to chalk it up to stress or lack of sleep. But the nursery became a battleground, a place where reality and the ethereal collided. Shadows danced on the walls, elongated figures that twisted and writhed. I'd find Jacob's toys arranged in intricate patterns, as if Ethan were trying to communicate. One evening, as I sat by the crib, I heard a voice, a whisper that seemed to come from the very air itself. "Why did you forget me, Daddy?" it said. I turned, expecting to see Jacob, but he was fast asleep. The room smelled of damp earth and decay, and I knew Ethan was near. Clara's obsession grew. She'd spend hours in the attic, poring over old photo albums, searching for any trace of Ethan. I'd find her weeping, clutching a faded picture of a baby swaddled in white. "He was real," she'd say, her eyes wild. "He existed." I couldn't deny it any longer. The house held secrets, layers of memories that refused to fade. I researched the property, digging into its history. A century ago, a family had lived here, a mother, a father, and twin boys. The boys were inseparable, their laughter echoing through the halls. But tragedy struck. The twins fell ill, and one night, one of the boys named Ethan had simply vanished. The parents searched, tore the house apart, but he was gone. They moved away, leaving behind a grief-stricken home. The echoes of their loss lingered, waiting for someone to hear. Clara's conviction terrified me. She'd sit in the nursery, rocking an empty cradle, singing lullabies to a ghost. I'd watch her, torn between love and fear. Was she losing her mind, or was there something more? I'd hear her whispering to Ethan, promising to find him, to reunite the brothers. And then, one stormy night, it happened. Lightning split the sky, illuminating the nursery. Clara stood by the window, her face pale, her eyes fixed on the darkness beyond. "He's here," she said. "Ethan has come back." I followed her gaze, and there, in the corner of the room, stood a boy, a mirror image of Jacob, but with eyes that held centuries of sorrow. He reached out, his fingers brushing against the glass. "Daddy," he whispered, and I felt the weight of 100 years pressing down on me. The house groaned under the weight of its secrets. Clara's obsession consumed her, and I watched helplessly as she danced on the precipice of madness. The unseen twin, Ethan, had become more than a ghost. He was a presence, a force that pulled us deeper into the abyss. I researched the old family, the one that had lived here before us. Their tragedy was etched into the very walls, and I wondered if they, too, had heard the whispers, felt the chill of a lost child. The birth records remained silent, but the heart of the house beat with memories. One night, as the moon hung low in the sky, I followed Clara to the attic. She held an old leather-bound book, its pages yellowed and brittle. "This was theirs," she said, her voice trembling. "The family who lost Ethan." The book revealed a pact, a desperate bargain made in the darkest hours. The parents had sought a way to bring Ethan back, to bridge the gap between life and death. They'd found an ancient ritual, a ritual that required sacrifice. A living child for a dead one. Clara's eyes burned with determination. "We can do it," she whispered. "We can bring him back." I tried to reason with her, to remind her of Jacob, our living son. But she was beyond reason, her grief a tempest that threatened to swallow us whole. She gathered herbs, drew symbols on the nursery floor, and chanted words that echoed through the ages. I watched, torn between love and fear. The room pulsed with energy, shadows writhing like snakes. Clara held Jacob in her arms, tears streaming down her face. "Ethan," she called. "Come back to us." And then, it happened, the air thickened, the walls trembled, and a figure materialized. Ethan stood before us, his eyes hollow, his skin translucent. He reached for Jacob, and Clara offered our living son to the ghost of the dead. But I couldn't let it happen. I lunged forward, pulling Jacob away. The room erupted, a cacophony of screams, whispers, and the sound of a heart breaking. Clara's eyes widened, and she collapsed, her strength drained. Ethan faded, his form dissolving into mist. "You broke the pact," he said, his voice a wisp of wind. "Now we are all lost." The house shook, its walls cracking. Clara lay unconscious, and I cradled Jacob, both boys in my arms. The room spun, reality unraveling. And then, in the chaos, I glimpsed the truth. The birth records had lied. Ethan had existed, but he was never meant to return. As the house collapsed around us, I made my choice. I whispered to the unseen twin, promising to keep his memory alive. And then, with a final scream, the world shattered. Now, in the ruins of our home, I hear the whispers, the echo of a forgotten pact. Clara is gone, lost to the other side. Jacob clings to life, but I see Ethan in his eyes, a shadow waiting to be reborn. And so, I write this, the story of a father torn between two sons, a house haunted by love and loss. If you ever visit our old home, listen carefully. You might hear the soft giggle of a child, the rustle of pages in an ancient book, and the echo of a promise unkept. Story 11. Unseen Eyes. I had always felt a strange connection to the old family house, perched on the edge of the sleepy town. It was as if the walls whispered secrets meant only for me. One lazy summer afternoon, driven by nostalgia, I climbed up to the attic. The air was thick with dust and memories. As I rummaged through boxes of forgotten relics, my hand brushed against the leather-bound spine of an old photo album. Curiosity piqued, I opened it to find a collection of my childhood photos. There I was, in various stages of youth, but something was amiss. In every photo, a dark figure loomed in the background. A chill ran down my spine as I realized this figure was present in every single memory captured on film. It was always there, watching, an unseen spectator to my life. The figure was indistinct, a mere shadow, yet its presence was unmistakable. It stood at a distance, never interacting, just observing. With each turn of the page, the figure seemed to inch closer, its form becoming more defined, more menacing. I couldn't recall anyone or anything like it from my childhood. I decided to investigate further, hoping to uncover some logical explanation. I visited the local library, delving into town records and old newspapers. That's when I stumbled upon a series of articles about a string of unexplained disappearances in the town, dating back to the time the photos were taken. The night brought no respite. I lay in bed, the album's images haunting my dreams. I dreamed of being watched, of eyes that followed me through the darkness. I woke up with a start, the feeling of being observed lingering long after the dream had faded. Determined to seek answers, I returned to the attic the next day. As I ascended the creaky stairs, a sense of dread settled over me. The album lay open, as if waiting for me, but I noticed something new, a photo I hadn't seen before. It was a picture of me sleeping, and the dark figure was now at the foot of my bed, its features horrifyingly clear. The town's archives revealed a grim history. Decades ago, a family had lived in our house, the Harrisons. They were reclusive, rarely seen outside their home. Rumors whispered of strange rituals performed in the dead of night, and the townsfolk avoided them like a plague. The Harrisons had a daughter, Evelyn, who vanished without a trace. Her disappearance coincided with the sudden abandonment of the house. The townspeople speculated that the family had fled, leaving behind their dark secrets. But what had become of Evelyn? I dug deeper, tracing the family's lineage. The photo album held more clues. In one picture, Evelyn stood by the window, her eyes wide with terror. The dark figure was there too, its form elongated, tendrils reaching toward her. I shuddered, wondering if it had taken her. As I delved into the past, I discovered an old diary hidden beneath the floorboards. The brittle pages revealed Evelyn's torment. She wrote of sleepless nights, of whispers echoing through the walls, of unseen eyes watching her every move. The entries grew frantic, desperate. She feared for her sanity. I became obsessed. The house consumed me. I slept little, haunted by nightmares of the dark figure. It was no longer content to remain in the background. It appeared in my waking hours, lurking at the edge of my vision. Its eyes, piercing, malevolent, bore into my soul. I reached out to a local historian, Dr. Samuel Blackwood, hoping he could shed light on the Harrisons. His office smelled of old books and pipe tobacco. He listened intently as I recounted my discoveries. His eyes widened when I showed him the photo album. "Evelyn," he murmured, tracing her image. She was the key. The Watcher. "What does it want?" I asked, my voice trembling. Dr. Blackwood leaned closer. "The Watcher feeds on fear, on the essence of the living. It binds itself to a bloodline, generation after generation. The Harrisons tried to break free, but it followed them. Now it's chosen you." Dr. Blackwood and I delved deeper into the Watcher's origins. The diary hinted at a ritual, a desperate attempt by the Harrisons to sever the connection. They had sought the help of an old crone, Madame Alohan, who lived deep in the forest. We followed the faded map to her secluded cabin. The air grew colder as we approached. Madame Alohan greeted us with rheumy eyes and gnarled hands. She listened to our tale, her expression grave. "The Watcher," she whispered, "is a parasite. It feeds on fear, but it also craves release. It wants to be seen, acknowledged." "But why?" I asked. "Because it was once human," she said. "A soul trapped between worlds. It yearns for redemption." She handed me a vial of murky liquid. "This is the Watcher's essence. Confront it. Show it the photos. Speak its name." Back in the house, I faced the photo album. The dark figure loomed, its eyes burning into mine. I whispered the name, Evelyn Harrison. The room trembled. Shadows writhed. The figure stepped out of the photo, its form shifting. It was Evelyn, her face twisted, eyes hollow. "Release me," she pleaded. I uncorked the vial. The Watcher's essence glowed. I splashed it on the figure. It screamed, its form unraveling. The walls cracked, and the house groaned. "Thank you," Evelyn whispered, fading into light. "Remember me." The house collapsed, leaving only rubble. Dr. Blackwood and I stood outside, staring at the ruins. "The Watcher is gone," he said. "But it'll find another bloodline." I glanced at the photo album, now empty. "We'll break the cycle," I vowed. As I walked away, I felt eyes on my back. The Watcher was gone, but its legacy lingered. I wondered if I'd ever truly escape its gaze. And so, dear listener, beware the unseen eyes. They watch, they wait, and they hunger for release. Story 12. The Sigil of Shadows. I awoke to a chilling silence, the kind that presses against your eardrums with an almost physical weight. My eyes adjusted to the dim light of dawn, and that's when I saw them, symbols, archaic and sinister, scrawled across the walls in a substance dreadfully reminiscent of blood. I reached out, trembling, to erase the marks, but they only proliferated, spreading like a contagion across the once pristine walls of my bedroom. The symbols pulsed with an otherworldly energy, and a cold dread settled in my bones. I couldn't shake the feeling that they were watching me, sentient in a way that defied logic. The air grew thick, charged with a static that made the hairs on my neck stand on end. I tried to call out, but my voice was a mere whisper, lost in the oppressive silence. As the symbols continued to multiply, I noticed they were forming a pattern, converging towards the mirror hanging opposite my bed. The glass surface began to shimmer, and within it, I glimpsed another world, a shadowy reflection of my room, distorted and dark. A figure stood there, its features obscured, yet its gaze bore into me with an intensity that felt like a physical force. I stumbled back, my heart racing, as the figure in the mirror reached out, its hand pressing against the glass. A crack appeared, spider webbing across the surface, and a low hum filled the room, growing louder until it was all I could hear. The symbols on the walls glowed brighter, and the air turned frigid. In a desperate attempt to escape the madness, I flung open the door to my room, only to find the hallway beyond transformed. The familiar pictures and furniture were gone, replaced by more of those accursed symbols and an impenetrable darkness that seemed to swallow the light. I turned back to the mirror, and the figure was closer now, its hand pushing through the glass, reaching for me. I could see its eyes, black voids that promised an eternity of torment. I knew then that I had to find a way to break the connection, to banish the entity before it could enter my world. With each step I took, the floorboards groaned, and the walls seemed to close in around me. I had to keep moving to find the source of this nightmare. But as I ventured deeper into the darkness, I realized that the house was no longer my own. It was a labyrinth, a trap set by whatever malevolent force had invaded my home. The house was a maze of shifting corridors, each turn leading me deeper into the abyss. The symbols on the walls pulsed in rhythm with my heartbeat, their crimson hue casting eerie shadows. I stumbled upon a room, a forgotten chamber that had no place in my memory. Its walls bore the same symbols, but here they were etched into the floor, forming a circle. In the center of that circle stood an old wooden table, its surface marred by age and neglect. On it lay a tarnished silver knife, its blade curved like a crescent moon. I hesitated, my fingers brushing against the cold metal. The symbols whispered secrets, urging me to take up the blade, to cut away the veil between worlds. The mirror in my bedroom had been a gateway, a portal through which the entity sought entry. But why? What did it want? I traced the symbols with trembling hands, my mind racing. The answer lay within the house, hidden in the very walls that now threatened to consume me. As I explored further, I discovered more rooms, each a tableau of horror. In one, a child's nursery lay frozen in time, the crib draped in cobwebs. In another, a study filled with dusty tomes revealed cryptic incantations. The symbols were everywhere, imprinted on the pages like a curse. I read aloud, my voice echoing through the empty room, and the walls trembled in response. Outside, the sun dipped below the horizon, casting elongated shadows that danced across the walls. The symbols writhed, their movements synchronized with the dying light. I had to find a way to break the connection, to sever the bond that held the entity captive. But how? The silver knife beckoned, its blade gleaming with malevolence. I gripped it tightly, my resolve hardening. If the symbols were the key, then perhaps they could also be the lock. I traced the circle on the floor, my blood mingling with the ancient markings. The blade cut deep, and pain flared through my palm. But I persisted, my desperation driving me forward. The room quaked, and the mirror shattered, shards of glass raining down like tears. The figure in the reflection screamed, a sound that scraped against my sanity. It was close now, almost free. I pressed the knife to the symbols, carving new lines, intersecting the old. The walls bled, and the air grew thick with anticipation. And then, as the last stroke fell, the symbols flared, blinding in their intensity. The room collapsed, folding in on itself. I was falling, weightless, through a void that swallowed me whole. The entity's laughter echoed in my ears, mocking and triumphant. When I opened my eyes, I was back in my room, the symbols gone. But the mirror remained shattered, and the figure still lingered, half-formed. It whispered promises of pain and madness, of a world beyond the veil. And as I stared into those black voids, I knew I had only scratched the surface of the horror that awaited. The shattered mirror haunted my dreams, its jagged edges slicing through my subconscious. Each night, I returned to that forsaken room, the symbols etched into my mind like a curse. The entity, half-formed, insatiable, whispered secrets, promising forbidden knowledge in exchange for my sanity. I sought answers beyond the veil. The old librarian, Mrs. Hawthorne, held the key. She lived in a crumbling house on the outskirts of town, surrounded by overgrown hedges and rumors of witchcraft. Her eyes, milky with age, bore witness to forgotten truths. I knocked on her door, my heart pounding. "Child," she rasped, "you seek the truth, but truth has a price." I nodded, desperate. The symbols, the mirror. "Tell me." Mrs. Hawthorne led me to her study, shelves sagging under ancient tomes. She traced the symbols on a yellowed page, her fingers trembling. "The sigil of shadows," she said. "A gateway to realms beyond. The entity seeks release, and you. I'm the unwitting key," I finished. She nodded. "To banish it, you must complete the ritual. The knife, the blood, it binds the entity. But beware, child. The abyss hungers." I returned home, the silver knife heavy in my hand. The symbols pulsed, urging me to finish what I'd started. The mirror awaited, its shards still sharp. I carved new lines, intersecting the old, my blood mingling with the ancient ink. The room trembled, and the air thickened. The figure in the reflection writhed, its eyes aflame. "Release me," it hissed. "The world beyond awaits." I hesitated. What lay beyond? Salvation or damnation? The house groaned, walls cracking. The abyss yawned wider, pulling me in. I stepped through the shattered mirror, my body dissolving into shadows. The other side was a nightmare, a twisted reflection of reality. The entity stood before me, fully formed now, its eyes devouring my soul. "Welcome," it said, voice echoing through eternity. "Why?" I asked. "Why me?" It laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "You were chosen, the one who woke the sigil. Now, you'll be the vessel." I fought back, but the abyss swallowed me whole. Memories unraveled, sanity fraying. I glimpsed other worlds, screaming souls, forgotten gods, and endless voids. The entity merged with me, our minds entwined. And now, as I write these words, I am both human and shadow. The symbols sear my flesh, etching their truth. The abyss beckons, and I am its harbinger. The mirror remains shattered, but the entity whispers. It wants out. It wants to consume. And so, I pen this warning, a plea to those who stumble upon the sigil of shadows. Beware the crimson awakening. For once you see beyond, there is no turning back. Story 13. The Unseen Light. I had always found comfort in the soft glow of my daughter's nightlight. It was a beacon of security, a silent guardian against the dark imaginings of the night. But recently, the light began to flicker, casting grotesque shadows that danced across the walls of her room like twisted marionettes. Each night, the flickering grew more pronounced, more erratic, as if conducting an otherworldly Morse code. One evening, as the shadows swayed with a frenetic urgency, I decided to investigate. The bulb should have been hot to the touch, yet it was cold, and to my horror, it was completely unscrewed. I stood there, staring at the bulb in my hand, while the light continued to pulse. It was impossible, yet the glow remained, unanchored by its filament. The air grew thick with a chilling silence, broken only by the soft hum of the persistent light. I called out to my daughter, but no reply came. The silence seemed to swallow the sound of my voice. With trepidation, I turned back to her room, only to find her bed empty, the covers thrown back in haste. I searched the house, calling her name with increasing desperation. The light from her room seemed to stretch out, tendrils of illumination reaching into the dark corners of the hallway. It was as if the house itself had become alive, watching me with unseen eyes. As I passed by the mirror in the hall, I caught a glimpse of movement. I spun around, but there was nothing, no one. The reflection showed the hallway behind me, bathed in the unnatural light from my daughter's room. Yet, something was off. The angles were wrong, the shadows cast by the flickering light didn't match, and for a fleeting moment, I thought I saw a figure standing just out of sight. I rushed back to her room, the light now pulsing in a steady rhythm, like a heartbeat. The shadows on the wall coalesced into a form, tall and thin, with elongated limbs that stretched out towards me. I could feel a presence, something ancient and malevolent, lurking in the periphery of my vision. As I stood frozen, a whisper brushed against my ear, a voice not heard but felt, "Find her before we do." The room grew colder, the light dimmer, and the shadows hungrier. I knew then that this was no mere electrical fault. Something had been unleashed, something that dwelled in the flickering silence. The following night, I sat by my daughter's bedside, my eyes fixed on the flickering light. The room had transformed into a sepulcher of secrets, its walls pulsating with an unseen energy. I wondered if I was losing my mind, if the shadows were mere tricks of the imagination. But the whispers, the insidious, barely audible murmurs, were real. "Find her before we do," the voice had said. Who were they? What did they want with my daughter? I had no answers, only questions that gnawed at my sanity. The light continued its erratic dance, casting elongated shapes that seemed to writhe in agony. I couldn't tear my gaze away. My daughter slept soundly, oblivious to the malevolence that clung to the room. Her innocence was a fragile shield against the encroaching darkness. I considered waking her, taking her far away from this cursed house, but something held me back. A compulsion, an unyielding force, kept me rooted to the spot. As the night wore on, the whispers grew louder. They slithered through the cracks in the walls, worming their way into my mind. I tried to block them out, humming a lullaby, but the words twisted, morphing into a sinister chant. Unscrewed, unscrewed, unscrewed. I ventured into the hallway, the light following me like a faithful specter. The mirror mocked me, reflecting a distorted version of myself. My eyes were hollow, my skin pallid. I looked like a man haunted by his own fears. And perhaps I was. The house seemed to breathe, a slow, deliberate inhalation. The walls pulsed, as if harboring secrets too terrible to reveal. I pressed my ear against the wood, listening for any clue. The whispers intensified, an army of voices overlapping, urging me to find her. But where? The light bulb remained unscrewed, its cold glass mocking my futile attempts to understand. I retraced my steps, searching every corner, every closet. The air grew colder, and I glimpsed fleeting shapes, shadows that flitted just beyond my vision. They hungered for something, something my daughter possessed. Back in her room, I knelt by her bed. Her face was serene, untouched by the malevolence that clung to the walls. I whispered her name, hoping she would wake, but she remained in slumber. The light pulsed, its rhythm matching the beat of my heart. And then, in the corner of my eye, I saw it, the faintest outline of a door. A door that hadn't been there before. It stood at the far end of the room, its edges blurred, as if existing in two worlds simultaneously. The whispers converged, urging me toward it. I hesitated, torn between fear and curiosity. But my daughter's safety outweighed all else. I stepped toward the door, the light now blinding, searing my retinas. And as I reached for the handle, the whispers coalesced into a single word, spoken with chilling clarity: home. The door stood before me, its edges wavering like a mirage. I hesitated, my fingers trembling as they brushed against the cold metal handle. The whispers had grown louder, urging me onward, promising answers beyond the threshold. I turned the handle, and the door swung open, revealing a darkness deeper than any night. It swallowed me whole, pulling me into its abyss. The air changed, thickening with a scent I couldn't place: rotting leaves, damp earth, and something else, something ancient. I stepped through, and the door closed behind me, sealing off the world I knew. The light from my daughter's room vanished, replaced by a faint glow that emanated from the walls themselves. The corridor stretched endlessly, its walls pulsing like a heartbeat. I walked, guided by instinct, driven by the need to find her. The whispers followed, no longer mere murmurs but distinct voices. They spoke of forgotten rituals, of bargains struck in desperation, of a hunger that transcended time. I stumbled upon a chamber, a circular room with walls adorned in faded symbols. The light here was stronger, revealing intricate patterns etched into the stone. In the center stood a well, a black void that seemed to reach into infinity. The whispers converged, urging me to peer inside. I leaned over the edge, and my reflection stared back, a man hollowed by fear, eyes wide with revelation. The well was a conduit, a gateway to realms beyond our understanding. She is the key, the whispers said. The unscrewed light, the fracture in reality. She can bridge the worlds. I understood then. My daughter was no ordinary child. She carried a secret, a lineage older than memory. The flickering light was a beacon, drawing the unseen toward her. And now, I stood at the crossroads, faced with a choice: protect her or unleash forces beyond reckoning. I retraced my steps, back to the door. But it wouldn't open. The whispers laughed, mocking my feeble attempts. "You've crossed the threshold," they said. "There's no going back." I pressed my palm against the door, feeling its ancient pulse. My daughter's name echoed through the darkness, a plea, a prayer. I closed my eyes, willing her safety, her return. And then, the door yielded, swinging open once more. The room beyond was different, a reflection of my daughter's, yet twisted. The night light flickered, casting shadows that danced in defiance of physics. And there she stood, my daughter, her eyes wide, her small hand reaching out. "Daddy," she whispered. I found the light. But it wasn't the same child. Her skin was translucent, her form ethereal. She stepped toward me, and I saw it, the well, its darkness seeping into her veins. She was the bridge, the unscrewed light, the convergence of worlds. I held her close, tears blurring my vision. "We'll find a way back," I promised. "We'll break the curse." But she shook her head. "It's too late," she said. "They're coming." And as the whispers swirled around us, I glimpsed them, the ancient beings, hungry and vengeful. They reached for my daughter, their fingers elongated, their eyes voids of malice. I clung to her, refusing to let go. But the darkness swallowed us, and the room collapsed, folding in on itself. We fell, spiraling through dimensions, until all that remained was the flickering light, the unscrewed bulb, the fractured reality. And there, in the void, my daughter's voice echoed, fading into eternity, home. Story 14. The Forgotten Echoes. I always believed the attic was just a dusty repository for forgotten memories, but that belief shattered the day I found the Ouija board. It was tucked away behind old trunks, swathed in cobwebs that seemed to cling to it like ancient secrets. The wooden planchette lay beside it, its eyes staring blankly as if it had been waiting for me. The house had been in my family for generations, and I'd returned to settle affairs after my grandmother's passing. She had always warned me to steer clear of the attic, but her warnings only fueled my curiosity. Now, with the house silent except for the creaking bones of its age, I felt a pull towards the board that I couldn't resist. I set the board on the floor, the letters and numbers swirling before my eyes in a dance of invitation. The planchette trembled under my fingertips as I whispered, "Is anybody there?" The air grew colder, the shadows in the corners deepened, and I heard it, a faint whisper, like a sigh from the walls themselves. The whispers grew louder, a chorus of voices that seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere at once. They spoke in languages I didn't understand, a cacophony of desperation and longing. I tried to pull away, but the planchette moved with a force of its own, spelling out a warning, never alone. Panic set in as the room spun around me, the whispers clawing at the edges of my sanity. I stumbled down the attic stairs, the board forgotten in my haste. But it was too late, the whispers followed me, a spectral presence that never left my side. As night fell, the whispers grew insistent, forming words I could understand. "Help us," they pleaded, a symphony of sorrow that filled my dreams with visions of shadowy figures bound to the house, their eyes hollow with despair. I woke to the sound of my own screams, the darkness of my room oppressive, the feeling of being watched unbearable. The whispers were a constant murmur in my ear, promising that this was only the beginning, that there was no escape from the forgotten echoes of the attic. The whispers clung to me like a shroud, their spectral fingers brushing against my skin. I tried to ignore them, but they were relentless. Every corner of the house seemed to hold its breath, waiting for me to make a move. The Ouija board lay discarded in the attic, but its influence seeped through the floorboards, infecting the very air I breathed. I wandered the halls, my footsteps echoing in the silence. The wallpaper peeled, revealing faded patterns of roses and thorns. The windows were perpetually fogged, as if the house itself wept for its lost souls. I traced my fingers along the banister, feeling the wood groan under my touch. The whispers grew louder, urging me to listen, to understand their pain. In the hallway, a portrait hung, a woman with hollow eyes and a Mona Lisa smile. Her gaze followed me, accusing and sorrowful. I wondered if she was one of the trapped souls, her essence bleeding into the walls. Her name was Evelyn, or so the whispers told me. She had died in this very house, her love unrequited, her soul forever bound. I stared at the portrait, my heart pounding. The whispers shifted, forming words, "Set us free." But how? The Ouija board had been my mistake, and now I was paying the price. I needed answers, and Evelyn seemed like the key. Her eyes held secrets, and I vowed to unravel them. The basement beckoned, a yawning mouth of darkness. I descended the creaking stairs, the whispers growing louder with each step. The air turned frigid, and I shivered. The walls were lined with shelves, dusty bottles containing memories long forgotten. Cobwebs clung to my hair, and I felt eyes upon me, unseen but ever present. At the far end, a mirror stood, a tarnished relic. I approached, my reflection wavering. The whispers converged, urging me to look deeper. My eyes widened as I saw not my own face, but a twisted version, a woman with sunken cheeks and hollow eyes. Evelyn. She reached out, her fingers brushing the glass. "Help us," she mouthed, her voice echoing in my mind. Time blurred in the basement. The whispers merged with the ticking of an ancient clock. Its pendulum swung, counting down to something inevitable. I traced the symbols etched on the mirror, runes of protection, or so I hoped. But the whispers scoffed, their laughter chilling my bones. "You can't escape," they murmured. "We are the house, and you are ours." I stumbled back, my breath ragged. The clock chimed midnight, and the basement trembled. Shadows danced, elongating into grotesque shapes. I knew then that I was trapped, a pawn in a game older than time. The Ouija board had opened a door, and now the house hungered for my soul. The whispers grew louder, their syllables weaving into my thoughts. I returned to the attic, the air thick with anticipation. The Ouija board lay where I'd left it, its letters glowing faintly. I hesitated, my fingers trembling as I placed them on the planchette. "What do you want?" I asked, my voice barely audible. The board responded, spelling out a name, Samuel. The whispers intensified, urging me to listen. Samuel had been the house's caretaker, a man who had vanished without a trace. His fate was tied to the Ouija board, and now he sought release. "Help me," the board spelled, its letters etching themselves into my mind. I searched the attic, desperate for answers. Among the forgotten relics, I found a dusty diary. Its pages crinkled as I opened it, revealing Samuel's handwriting. His words were a confession, a pact he'd made with the spirits that haunted the house. In exchange for their secrets, he'd promised them his soul. The diary spoke of rituals performed in the dead of night, of whispered promises and forbidden knowledge. Samuel had become their vessel, a conduit for their pain. The Ouija board was their gateway, and now it was mine. I read on, my heart pounding, as Samuel's descent into madness unfolded. The whispers followed me everywhere, the kitchen, the garden, even my dreams. They spoke of a reckoning, a debt that had to be paid. I tried to ignore them, but they grew insistent. The clock in the hallway chimed, its pendulum swinging with purpose. Midnight approached, the hour when the veil between worlds thinned. I returned to the basement, the mirror waiting. Samuel's reflection stared back at me, hollow-eyed and desperate. "You must choose," he whispered. "Release us or become one of us." The runes on the mirror glowed, their power pulling me in. I had glimpsed the other side, the torment of the trapped souls. But could I sacrifice my own soul to set them free? I traced the runes, my resolve hardening. The whispers merged into a chorus, their voices urging me to decide. Evelyn's eyes haunted me, her pain etched into my soul. I closed my eyes, my hand trembling as I whispered the incantation. The mirror trembled, and the room filled with a blinding light. When I opened my eyes, I was no longer alone. Samuel stood beside me, his form translucent. "Thank you," he said, his voice a mere echo. The whispers faded, replaced by a profound silence. The house exhaled, its breath releasing me from its grip. But as I stepped away, I felt a presence, the Ouija board, its letters rearranging themselves. "Never alone," it spelled. The pact was sealed, and I knew I would forever carry the whispers, the forgotten echoes of the attic. And so, dear listener, heed my warning, beware the Ouija board, for it holds secrets that can never be unspoken. The house waits, hungry for souls, and the whispers linger, waiting for the next fool who dares to listen. Story 15. The White Haunting. I had always believed our house harbored no secrets, no whispers in the dark, no eyes peering through the veil of night. That was until my husband, Ethan, began to dream of her, the woman in white. His screams would pierce the silence of our bedroom, a chilling reminder that something was terribly wrong. Each night, the dreams grew more vivid, his descriptions more harrowing. He spoke of her cold touch, her mournful wails, and her eyes, empty as the void. The nightmares seemed to follow a sinister pattern, each one ending with the woman in white beckoning him to follow her into the darkness. Ethan's days were consumed by fatigue, his nights by fear. I watched helplessly as the man I loved was slowly unraveling before my eyes. The doctors had no answers, their pills and platitudes useless against the specter that haunted him. Then came the night that changed everything. I awoke to an eerie silence, the kind that screams in its quietness. Ethan's side of the bed was empty, the sheets twisted and stained with blood, a stark contrast to the pale moonlight that washed over them. Panic gripped my heart as I called out his name, only to be met with the echoes of my own voice. I searched the house frantically, each room as desolate as the last. It wasn't until I reached the attic that I found him, or what was left of him. Ethan was slumped against the old chest we never bothered to open, his eyes wide with an expression of pure terror. The air was thick with the scent of iron, and the walls were painted with crimson whispers. In the midst of the chaos, a single piece of parchment lay at my feet. The writing was erratic, a message scrawled in desperation, "She's here, and she's hungry." My blood ran cold as I heard it, the soft, haunting melody of a lullaby, sung by a voice as delicate as it was deadly. The woman in white was no longer just a figment of Ethan's nightmares. She was real, and she had crossed over into our world. As I stood there, frozen in horror, I knew that this was only the beginning. The White Lady had marked me as her next prey, and the hunt had just begun. The days blurred into weeks, and the weeks into months. The White Lady's presence lingered, a shadow that clung to the corners of my vision. I became obsessed with unraveling her secrets, desperate to understand why she had chosen Ethan, why she had marked him as her prey. I delved into forgotten archives, seeking any mention of a woman in white who had haunted this land before. The townspeople whispered of a tragedy, a bride left waiting at the altar, her heart shattered by betrayal. They spoke of a curse, a pact made in blood, and a promise of vengeance that transcended death itself. The old priest, Father Matthias, was my last hope. His eyes held ancient knowledge, and his voice trembled as he recounted the legend. She was Isabella, he said, a bride forsaken by her lover. In her grief, she made a pact with the darkness, a pact that bound her to this world, forever seeking retribution. But why Ethan? I asked, my voice barely audible. Why haunt my husband's dreams? Father Matthias crossed himself, his fingers brushing the silver crucifix around his neck. The White Lady feeds on fear, he said. She thrives on the terror of those she haunts. Your husband's nightmares are her sustenance, and now she craves more. I returned home, my mind racing. The attic had become my sanctuary, its walls adorned with protective symbols, salt lines, iron nails, and prayers etched in Latin. But the nightmares persisted, growing darker, more insistent. Ethan's once vibrant eyes were now hollow, haunted by the specter that tormented him. One night, as the moon hung low in the sky, I heard her, the soft rustle of silk, the whisper of her breath. The White Lady stood at the foot of our bed, her gown billowing like mist. Her eyes were bottomless pits, and her lips curved into a cruel smile. "He is mine," she hissed, her voice echoing through the room. I lunged at her, my fingers passing through her ethereal form. "No!" I screamed. "You won't take him." But she was gone, leaving only a trail of frost in her wake. I turned to Ethan, his face ashen. "We have to break the curse," I said. "We have to find her grave, release her spirit." Together, we followed the clues, the twisted tales, the cryptic symbols, the moonlit paths that led us deeper into the forest. And there, beneath the gnarled oak, we found it, the unmarked grave of Isabella. The earth yielded to our desperate hands, revealing bones as fragile as frost. As we burned the remains, the White Lady appeared one last time. Her eyes held a terrible hunger, and her voice echoed with centuries of pain. "You cannot save him," she said. "He is mine." But we pressed on, chanting the ancient incantations, binding her spirit to the flames. The ground trembled, and the air crackled with energy. And then, with a final scream, she was gone, a wisp of smoke, a memory fading into the night. Ethan's nightmares ceased, and color returned to his cheeks. But I knew the truth: the White Lady was not defeated. She had merely retreated, waiting for another soul to feed upon. And as I lay beside my husband, listening to his steady breaths, I wondered how long we could keep her at bay. Story 16. The shadows are alive. I had always believed our home was a sanctuary, a place where the laughter of my son, Jacob, filled the rooms with warmth. But lately, the walls echoed with a different kind of murmur, a language I couldn't decipher. Jacob's obsession with drawing arcane symbols had become more than a child's whimsy. It was a compulsion, driven by an unseen force that left chills down my spine. Each symbol was intricate, a labyrinth of lines that twisted and turned like serpents entwined. He said they were for protection, to keep the nightmares at bay. I humored him, thinking it was just a phase, until last night. I found him asleep, not in his bed, but on the floor, encircled by flickering candles. The air was thick with the scent of wax and something else, something metallic. The shadows cast by the candlelight danced across the walls, independent of their sources. They twisted into shapes that defied logic, forms that seemed to whisper secrets meant only for Jacob. I reached out to wake him, but hesitated. The air around him felt charged, electric, as if I were about to interrupt a sacred ritual. I watched, heart pounding, as one shadow detached itself from the wall. It slithered across the floor, a tendril of darkness reaching for my son. I lunged forward, breaking the circle of candles, and grabbed Jacob. The room plunged into darkness as the candles snuffed out, and a cold silence enveloped us. When the lights returned, the symbols on the walls were gone, erased as if they had never been. Jacob awoke, confused and scared, asking why I had disturbed his guardians. I couldn't answer. I didn't understand what had happened, but I knew our lives had irrevocably changed. The next day, I found more symbols, this time etched into the wooden floor beneath Jacob's bed. They were deeper, more deliberate, and I couldn't shake the feeling that they were alive, pulsating with an energy I couldn't comprehend. As night fell, I tucked Jacob into bed, watching as his eyelids fluttered closed. But sleep eluded me. I sat in the living room, the weight of unease heavy on my shoulders. Then, a faint scratching sound began, emanating from Jacob's room. It grew louder, more frantic, as if something was clawing its way through the walls. The following night, I sat cross-legged on the floor of Jacob's room, my fingers tracing the sigils etched into the wood. They seemed to pulse, responding to my touch, as if they recognized me. The room was colder than usual, and the air tasted metallic, like blood. Jacob slept soundly in his bed, oblivious to the shadows gathering around him. I had become a reluctant guardian, my duty to protect him from whatever malevolence these symbols held at bay. But I needed answers. Why had my son become a conduit for this otherworldly force? I researched ancient texts, desperate for clues. The symbols resembled no known language or script. They were primal, older than civilization itself. My findings led me to a forgotten cult, the Order of the Veiled Whisperers. They believed that certain individuals could communicate with entities from the Shadow Realm, acting as intermediaries between our world and theirs. The cult's rituals involved drawing sigils, invoking spirits, and binding them to specific locations. The purpose? To keep the balance between realms intact. But what had gone wrong? Why had Jacob become their vessel? And what did they want from him? As days turned into weeks, the whispers grew louder. They slithered through the walls, insinuating themselves into my thoughts. I saw glimpses of their world, a place of shifting darkness, where time flowed differently. They hungered for release, for a way to breach the barrier that separated us. Jacob's drawings became more intricate, more desperate. He spoke of the Keeper, a shadowy figure who visited him at night. The Keeper promised protection, but at a cost. Jacob's innocence was fading, replaced by a knowingness that chilled me to the bone. One evening, as the moon hung low in the sky, I followed the whispers. They led me to the basement, where a hidden door beckoned. The wood was old, gnarled, and bore the same symbols as Jacob's room. I pushed it open, revealing a narrow staircase that descended into darkness. The air grew thicker, laden with anticipation. The walls pulsed, matching the rhythm of my heartbeat. At the bottom of the stairs, I found a chamber, a shrine to the veiled whispers. Candles flickered, casting elongated shadows on the walls. In the center stood a pedestal, upon which rested a blackened tome. The whispers intensified, urging me forward. I opened the tome, its pages brittle and yellowed. The language was the same as Jacob's symbols, their secrets laid bare. The keeper's name echoed through my mind, a promise of power, of understanding. But at what cost? I read the incantation aloud, my voice trembling. The room quaked, and the walls bled shadows. The barrier weakened, and I glimpsed the other side, a realm of writhing darkness, hungry and vast. The keeper materialized, eyes like voids, and whispered truths that shattered my sanity. The keeper's whispers echoed in my mind, a symphony of madness. He revealed the truth: the sigils were not mere protection, they were anchors. Jacob's drawings had weakened the barrier between worlds, allowing the veiled whispers to seep through. I confronted Jacob, his eyes hollow, pupils dilated. He spoke in a language I couldn't comprehend, his voice layered with echoes. "The keeper chose me," he said. "I am the bridge." Desperation drove me to seek answers beyond the tome. I delved into forbidden rituals, tracing the lineage of the veiled whispers. Their origins were lost in time, but their purpose remained: to maintain equilibrium. The keeper was their guardian, a sentinel who ensured that neither realm encroached upon the other. But something had changed. The whispers grew insistent, demanding release. The keeper hungered for freedom, and Jacob was the key. I had to make a choice: save my son or protect our world. The basement beckoned once more. I descended, the walls pulsing with anticipation. The blackened tome lay open, its pages aflame. The incantation awaited completion, a final verse that would either seal the breach or unleash chaos. Jacob stood beside me, his skin translucent, veins tracing the sigils. His eyes held centuries of knowledge. "The keeper is ancient," he whispered. "He remembers when stars were born." I recited the incantation, my voice trembling. The room quaked, shadows writhing. The barrier thinned, revealing glimpses of the other side, a realm of shifting shapes, where forgotten gods slumbered. The keeper materialized, his form shifting, a blend of shadow and memory. "Release me," he commanded. "The balance must shift." I hesitated. Jacob's life hung in the balance. The whispers intensified, urging me to choose. The keeper's eyes bore into mine, and I glimpsed eternity, the weight of existence, the fragility of reality. I made my decision. "You will remain bound," I said. "Jacob is not your pawn." The keeper howled, the walls cracking. Shadows lunged, clawing at my flesh. I completed the incantation, sealing the breach. The room collapsed, and I woke in darkness. Jacob lay beside me, his eyes clear, innocence restored. But the whispers lingered, faint echoes of a forgotten truth. The veiled whispers retreated, their hunger sated, for now. As dawn painted the sky, I vowed to protect my son. The sigils remained etched into our lives, a reminder of the thin veil that separated us from the unknown. And somewhere, in the depths of shadow, the keeper watched, a silent sentinel, waiting for the next breach. Story 17. Whispers in the Glass. I always believed mirrors were gateways, not to other worlds, but to the deepest parts of our own minds. That belief shattered the night my reflection defied reality. It began as a whisper, a silent mouthing of words I strained to understand. The bathroom was cold, the kind of cold that seeps into your bones, and the mirror was frosted over as if it breathed a life of its own. Each evening, I'd catch it, my other self, mouthing something urgent. I ignored it until curiosity overcame fear. One night, I leaned in, the glass chilling my skin, and my reflection's lips moved with desperate speed. It was a warning, I realized too late, as its hand shot out, fingers wrapping around my throat with an icy grip. Panic set in as I struggled against the hold of my mirrored counterpart. Its eyes, my eyes, were wide with terror, mirroring my own. The room spun, and the light flickered, casting shadows that danced and twisted around us. I could feel its breath, cold and stinging, as it whispered words I finally understood, "Behind you." I wrenched free, tumbling backward, and spun around. The bathroom was empty, but the air was charged with a presence I couldn't see. The mirror now reflected only the room, but the frost remained, spreading across the surface like creeping vines. I left the bathroom, the image of my grasping reflection burned into my memory. Sleep evaded me that night. Every shadow seemed to move, every noise a whisper from the glass. The next day, I avoided my reflection, but as night fell, a compulsion drew me back. The mirror was clear, but the cold was there, waiting. I watched as my reflection raised a finger to its lips, then pointed behind me once more. This time, I didn't turn around. I watched in horror as a shadowy figure materialized in the reflection, standing just inches behind me. Its form was indistinct, but its intent was clear. I was not alone, and the mirror was no longer my own mind's gateway, it was a door for something else. As the figure reached for me, the mirror fogged over once again, and the words of my reflection came through in a chilling hiss, "Run." The days blurred into nights, and my reflection became my silent confidant. I couldn't escape its gaze, its mouth moving soundlessly, urging me to uncover the truth. The mirror held secrets, and I was drawn to them like a moth to a flame. I researched the house's history, desperate for answers. The previous owner had vanished without a trace, leaving behind only a cryptic journal. The pages were filled with ramblings about mirrors that whispered, about a realm beyond our own. I read about a ritual, the Reflections Pact, that bound souls to their reflections, granting them glimpses into the unseen. The mirror's frost spread, encroaching on the edges, and I knew time was running out. Each night, I stood before it, waiting for the whispers. My reflection's eyes pleaded with me, and I wondered if it was a warning or an invitation. The figure in the glass grew more defined, its features twisted and tormented. One evening, as the moon hung low, I pressed my hand against the mirror. The cold seeped into my skin, and I whispered the words from the journal, "I seek the truth." The glass trembled, and the room darkened. The figure stepped out, its form solidifying. It wore the face of the vanished owner, hollow eyes fixed on mine. "You seek," it rasped, "but do you dare?" I nodded, my heart pounding. The figure beckoned, and I stepped through the mirror, leaving my reflection behind. The other side was a twisted reflection of our world, a place where shadows whispered and memories bled into reality. The figure led me deeper, through corridors of fractured glass, until we reached a chamber. There, in the center, stood a mirror larger than any I'd seen. Its surface rippled, showing glimpses of other worlds, other lives. The figure gestured, and I understood. The Reflections Pact awaited me. To know the truth, I had to bind my soul to the glass. I hesitated, torn between fear and curiosity. My reflection appeared beside me, its lips moving in silent encouragement. I stepped closer, my breath fogging the mirror. The figure's hand rested on my shoulder, and I whispered the pact's words, sealing my fate. The mirror absorbed me, and suddenly, I was both observer and observed. I saw the house through countless eyes, the vanished owner, the curious child, the desperate lover. Their whispers echoed in my mind, their stories merging with mine. But the truth was darker than I'd imagined. The mirror was a prison, and the figure my jailer. It hungered for souls, feeding off their reflections. I was trapped, my body on one side, my essence on the other. And as the mirror whispered its secrets, I realized I was not alone. The mirror world was a labyrinth of twisted corridors, each leading to forgotten memories and lost souls. I wandered, my footsteps echoing in the glass, my breath visible in the cold air. The figure, the jailer, trailed behind, its eyes hollow and hungry. I encountered others like me, souls trapped in fractured reflections. Their faces were masks of despair, their whispers a cacophony of pain. They reached out, fingers brushing against my skin, seeking solace or salvation. But I had none to offer. I was a trespasser, a seeker of truth who'd bargained away his own existence. The mirror world shifted, revealing glimpses of my past. I saw my childhood home, my parents' faces etched with worry. I saw the day I lost my sister, the accident that tore her away from me. The mirror whispered, "She's here too," and I knew I wasn't alone in my suffering. The figure urged me forward, toward the heart of the mirror. There, in a chamber bathed in ethereal light, stood a throne of glass. The figure gestured, and I climbed the steps, my reflection watching from below. The throne was cold, unforgiving, and as I sat, memories flooded my mind. I remembered the night I'd first heard the whispers. My sister had stood beside me, her eyes wide, her lips moving soundlessly. She'd pointed at the mirror, her gaze pleading. "Don't listen," she'd whispered. "Don't seek." But I hadn't listened. I'd pressed my hand against the glass, and the mirror had whispered secrets, the truth about my sister's death, the guilt that gnawed at my soul. I'd bargained, desperate for answers, and now I paid the price. The figure knelt before me, its voice a rasp. "You sought truth," it said. "Now you must choose." Choose? I glanced at my reflection, its eyes filled with sorrow. "What choice?" "To remain," the figure said, "or to return. To forget, or to remember." I understood. The mirror held memories, the ones I'd lost, the ones I'd buried. If I stayed, I'd know everything, the pain, the guilt, the truth. But I'd be a ghost, a whisper in the glass, forever bound to this fractured realm. If I returned, I'd forget. The whispers would fade, and life would resume its normal course. But my sister's face would blur, her voice a distant echo. I hesitated, torn between two worlds. The mirror trembled, and my reflection reached out, its fingers grazing mine. "Choose," it mouthed. I closed my eyes, my heart heavy. "I choose," I whispered. The mirror shattered, and I fell, back into my own body, back into the bathroom. The frost had vanished, and the room was warm. But my reflection was gone, replaced by a blank surface. I touched the glass, feeling the remnants of memories slip away. My sister's face faded, and the whispers ceased. I was free, but the truth was lost. And as I stared into the empty mirror, I wondered, was it worth it? Story 18. Lost Reflections. I always believed mirrors held a piece of our souls. That belief turned into a curse the day my wife, Anna, inherited her grandmother's antique mirror. It was a grand, ornate thing, with a frame carved from dark wood and a surface that never seemed to tarnish. From the moment it graced our home, Anna was captivated by it. She'd spend hours gazing into its depths, her lips moving in silent conversation. I'd ask who she was talking to, but she'd just smile and say, "Old family secrets, love." As days passed, her behavior grew odder. She'd whisper to the mirror at all hours, her reflection always grinning back, even when her face was somber. I'd wake in the dead of night to find her side of the bed empty, only to see her silhouette outlined by the moonlight, her whispers blending with the wind. One evening, I confronted her. "What's in that mirror?" I demanded. Her eyes met mine, and for a moment, I saw a flicker of fear, or was it a warning? "It's not the mirror," she said, her voice a tremble. "It's what looks back from the other side." That night, I dreamed of shadows creeping along our walls, of whispers that turned into screams, and of Anna's reflection, smiling with a malice that chilled me to the bone. I awoke to an empty bed and a silence that pressed against my ears. I rushed to the mirror, and there she was, her back to me, whispering fervently. "Anna." I called out. She turned slowly, her face pale as death, her eyes hollow. "It wants you," she said, pointing to the mirror. I looked into the glass, and my blood ran cold. There, in our reflection, stood a figure behind us, its smile wide and hungry. The mirror became an obsession. Anna's once vibrant eyes dulled, and her laughter turned brittle. She'd stand before the glass, her fingers tracing the intricate patterns etched into the frame. "It's calling me," she'd whisper, her breath fogging the surface. "Can't you hear it?" I tried to ignore the mirror, but its pull was inexorable. Late at night, I'd find myself drawn to it, my reflection distorted by the antique glass. The room seemed colder when I stood before it, as if the mirror absorbed warmth and light. And always, that other figure lingered behind us, its grin stretching impossibly wide. Anna's health deteriorated. Shadows clung to her skin, and her once lustrous hair turned brittle. She'd wake screaming, her eyes wide with terror. "It's coming," she'd gasp. From the other side. Desperation drove me to research. I scoured old books, seeking answers. The mirror's history was murky, but one tale stood out, a woman, much like Anna, who'd inherited the same mirror. She'd vanished, leaving behind only a cryptic note, "The reflection consumes." I confronted Anna. "We have to destroy it," I said. But she shook her head, her eyes feverish. "It's too late. It knows me now." One moonless night, I watched her. She stood before the mirror, her whispers frantic. I glimpsed movement behind her, a shadow, elongated and sinuous. It reached out, fingers brushing her reflection's cheek. Anna's eyes widened, and she mouthed a word, "Help." I lunged, smashing the mirror with a chair. The glass shattered, and the room filled with a keening wail. Anna collapsed, her body convulsing. The shadow retreated, merging with the shards. I cradled Anna, her skin icy. "I love you," I whispered. But her reflection grinned, and Anna's eyes glowed with malevolence. "You should have listened," she said. "Now it's free." The shards of the mirror lay scattered across the floor, their edges sharp as betrayal. Anna's body trembled, her breath shallow. I cradled her, desperate to save her from whatever malevolence had consumed her. "It's free," she whispered, her voice a mere echo. "The reflection, it's out there." I glanced at the broken glass. The shadow had vanished, but its presence lingered, a stain on reality. "What do we do?" I asked, my heart pounding. Anna's eyes met mine, and for a moment, I saw my wife, the woman I'd loved, trapped within. "You must find the truth," she said. "The mirror holds answers." I searched the remnants of her grandmother's belongings. Old letters, faded photographs, they all pointed to a house on the outskirts of town. The locals spoke of it in hushed tones, the Whispering Glass Manor. Its history was shrouded in darkness, tales of lost souls and forbidden knowledge. The manor stood atop a hill, its windows like empty eyes. The air smelled of damp earth and decay. As I stepped inside, the walls seemed to breathe, secrets pulsing through the wood. Dust motes danced in the dim light, and the mirror awaited me, a twin to the one we'd shattered. Its surface held a reflection, Anna, her eyes wide, her lips moving. "Listen," she whispered. "The truth lies beyond." I touched the glass, and the room spun. I emerged in a corridor, its walls adorned with portraits, people who'd gazed into the mirror and never returned. Their eyes followed me, accusing. In the heart of the manor, I found an ancient book. Its pages crumbled as I read, the whispering glass binds souls. To free one, another must take its place. Anna's voice echoed. "You must choose." I returned home, the mirror's pull stronger than ever. Anna lay on her bed, her skin translucent. "Release me," she pleaded. "Find someone else." I hesitated, torn between love and fear. The mirror grinned, its reflection merging with Anna's. "Choose," it whispered. And so, I stood before the mirror, my reflection wavering. The manor's secrets whispered, the price is paid. Anna's form dissolved, and the mirror absorbed her. I glimpsed her smile, one of triumph or farewell, I couldn't tell. The room grew colder, and the shadow returned, its grin stretching impossibly wide. Now, I stare into the glass, my lips moving. Anna's voice answers from the other side. "It's your turn." And so, I whisper secrets, and the mirror smiles back. Story 19. Dark Whispers. I had always prided myself on being rational, a person of science who didn't jump at shadows or get spooked by the creaks and groans of an old house. But as I stood there, staring at the clump of long, black hair in my shower drain, a chill ran down my spine. It was the 4th time this month I'd found such a thing, and I lived alone. The house was an inheritance, a quaint 2-story building nestled in the outskirts of town. It had been in the family for generations, and though it was mine now, it felt like I was just another guest passing through. The walls were lined with old photographs of stern-faced ancestors, their eyes seeming to follow me as I moved. Each night, as I lay in bed, the silence of the house was broken by a whisper. It was soft, almost gentle, calling my name from behind the bathroom door. Evelyn, it would say, stretching my name out like a sigh. I told myself it was the wind, or the house settling, or my own imagination running wild. But tonight was different. The whispering was persistent, more insistent than before. I found myself drawn to the bathroom, hand trembling as I reached for the doorknob. The door creaked open, revealing the dimly lit room, but there was no one there. Just the echo of my own breath and the distant sound of whispering. I decided to investigate the history of the house, hoping to find a logical explanation. The local library held records dating back centuries, and there, I found mention of a woman with long, black hair who once lived in my home. Her name was Eliza, and she had vanished without a trace over 100 years ago. That night, as I tried to sleep, the whispers grew louder. Evelyn, they called, over and over, until I could no longer ignore them. I got up and approached the bathroom, the air growing colder with each step. As I reached for the light switch, a figure appeared in the mirror, a woman, with long, black hair covering her face. I spun around, but there was nothing there. When I looked back at the mirror, she was gone. My heart raced, and I knew that whatever was happening, it wasn't just in my head. There was something in this house, something that had been waiting for me. The days that followed were a blur of sleepless nights and eerie occurrences. Objects would move on their own, doors would slam shut, and the air would often grow thick with the scent of lilacs, Eliza's favorite, I discovered from an old diary I found hidden in the attic. I began to see her everywhere, in the shadows of the hallway, in the reflection of windows, always just out of sight. But it was the whispers that haunted me the most. They were no longer just at night, they followed me throughout the day, a constant murmur in my ear. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the room, I heard a sob from the bathroom. It was a sound so filled with sorrow that it rooted me to the spot. "Evelyn," the voice cried, "help me." I mustered the courage to enter the bathroom once more. The air was colder than ever, and as I stepped inside, the whispers ceased abruptly. The silence was suffocating. "Eliza?" I called out, my voice barely a whisper. "Are you there?" The mirror fogged up, and words began to form on the glass. "Find me," they read. I reached out to touch them, but as my fingers brushed the surface, the mirror shattered, sending shards flying across the room. I shielded my face, and when I looked again, the words were gone. The next day, I went to the town's historical society. There, I learned about Eliza's tragic love affair with a man who disappeared, leaving her heartbroken. They say she died of a broken heart, but her body was never found. It was as if she had simply vanished into thin air. That night, the whispers grew louder, more desperate. "Find me, Evelyn," they pleaded. I knew then that I couldn't ignore them any longer. Eliza's spirit was trapped, and she needed my help. But as I prepared to uncover the truth, I couldn't shake the feeling that something darker was lurking in the shadows, watching, waiting. The whispers had become my constant companion, guiding me through the house's hidden crevices and forgotten stories. I felt Eliza's presence growing stronger, her desperation seeping into the very walls that confined her. It was a race against time, a search for answers that seemed to slip through my fingers like sand. I scoured every inch of the house, following the trail of whispers that led me to the basement, a place I had avoided since my arrival. The air was thick with dust and the past, and as I descended the creaking stairs, the temperature dropped, breath visible in the air. "Help me, Evelyn," the whispers echoed in the darkness. I found myself standing before an old chest, its wood warped with age. The lock was broken, and inside, I found a bundle of letters, love notes between Eliza and her mysterious lover. They spoke of a forbidden love, a promise to run away together, and a heart-wrenching goodbye. As I read the last letter, a cold hand brushed against mine. I jerked back, dropping the papers, and they scattered across the floor. The whispers grew frantic, swirling around me, and I felt a pull towards the far corner of the basement. There, hidden beneath a loose floorboard, was a small, decayed pouch. Inside was a lock of long, black hair, tied with a ribbon, and a small, faded photograph of Eliza. Her eyes, full of sorrow, seemed to stare right into my soul. "Find him," the whispers begged. I knew then what I had to do. I had to find out what happened to her lover, to bring closure to her restless spirit. The whispers guided me to the town's old records, where I uncovered the truth. Her lover had been accused of a crime he didn't commit and was executed, his name tarnished. Armed with this knowledge, I returned to the house. I could feel Eliza's presence, her anxiety palpable. "It wasn't his fault," I said aloud, holding the photograph. "He loved you, Eliza. He never abandoned you." The house trembled, a low moan rising from the depths. Shadows danced along the walls, and the whispers crescendoed into a deafening roar. Then, silence. A figure materialized before me, Eliza, her face no longer hidden by hair. Tears streamed down her cheeks as she reached out to me. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice fading. The shadows retreated, and a sense of peace settled over the house. But as I exhaled in relief, a new whisper slithered into my ear, one that wasn't Eliza's. "You found her," it hissed. "Now, who'll find you?" Story 20. The Unseen Playmate. I always believed in the rational, the explainable. The world was a place of cause and effect, not of shadows and whispers. That was until the night I saw my son, Jacob's, imaginary friend. My wife, Laura, had always laughed it off, a phase of a creative child's mind. But last night, as I passed by his room, I heard the distinct sound of two voices. Curiosity piqued, I peered in to find Jacob sitting cross-legged on the floor, a board game spread out before him and an empty space across from him. "Your move, Mr. Smiles," Jacob said with a giggle. I watched, bemused, as a game piece moved across the board as if held by invisible fingers. A chill ran down my spine, but I shook it off, attributing it to a trick of the light or a draft. That's when I saw it. The room grew colder, and from the corner, a shadow stretched across the wall, not matching anything in the room. It twisted and turned until it formed the shape of a man, tall and thin, with a hat that seemed to scrape the ceiling. The shadow turned towards me, and where the face should be, a grin appeared, impossibly wide and filled with too many teeth. I stumbled back, my heart racing. "Dad, are you okay?" Jacob's voice pulled me back to reality. The shadow was gone, the room warm again, and Jacob looked at me with concern. I forced a smile, telling him I was fine, just tired. But as I retreated to my room, the image of that grin haunted me. I didn't sleep that night, and when dawn broke, I found myself questioning everything I thought I knew. The next day, I watched Jacob play alone, talking and laughing with his unseen friend. Laura noticed my unease but dismissed it with a kiss on the cheek. "It's just a phase," she said. But the doubt lingered, festering like a wound. That evening, I decided to confront the shadow. I waited until Jacob was asleep and crept into his room, a flashlight in hand. I scanned the walls, the corners, the closet. Nothing. I was about to leave when I heard it, a whisper, so faint I thought I imagined it. "Looking for me?" I spun around, the flashlight's beam cutting through the darkness. There, in the corner, the shadow loomed, its grin wider than ever. "Who are you?" I demanded, my voice barely a whisper. The shadow chuckled, a sound like leaves rustling in the wind. "A friend," it said, "Jacob's friend. And soon, yours too." I backed away, my mind reeling. This couldn't be happening. It was impossible. Yet, there it was, a presence in my son's room, a being that defied explanation. I fled, the shadow's laughter echoing in my ears. As I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, I knew one thing for certain: this was no ordinary phase. This was something far more sinister. The days blurred into weeks, and the shadow remained. I tried to ignore it, to convince myself that it was a figment of my imagination. But the whispers, the incessant, maddening whispers, grew louder. They came from the walls, the floorboards, even the cracks in the ceiling. I'd wake in the dead of night, my heart pounding, and listen to their eerie cadence. "He's ours now. Join us." The grinning one waits. I couldn't escape it. The shadow had become more than an imaginary friend. It was a malevolent force, a presence that seeped into every corner of our home. Laura noticed my exhaustion, my haunted expression, but she attributed it to work stress. She didn't hear the whispers, didn't feel the weight of the unseen eyes upon us. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, I followed the whispers. They led me to Jacob's room. The door creaked open, and there he was, sitting cross-legged on the floor, the game board set up once more. But this time, the pieces moved on their own. The shadow stood beside him, its grin wider than ever. "Welcome," it whispered, its voice like ice against my skin. I stepped closer, my breath hitching. "What do you want?" I asked, my voice trembling. The shadow's laughter echoed through the room. "We want to play," it said. "A game of life and death." The pieces rearranged themselves, forming a twisted path. "Your move, Father." I hesitated, torn between fear and curiosity. The shadow leaned in, its breath cold against my cheek. "Choose wisely," it murmured. I moved a piece, and the room shifted. The walls closed in, the air thickened. The game was no longer a child's plaything, it was a battle for something far more precious. Jacob watched, innocent eyes wide. "Daddy, who are you talking to?" he asked. But I couldn't tear my gaze from the board. The shadow's grin stretched impossibly wider. "Your move," it urged. I played, each move a gamble. The whispers intensified, urging me to sacrifice, to choose. And then it happened, the board split open, revealing a pit of darkness. "One more move," the shadow hissed. "Claim your prize." I looked at Jacob, my son, and knew. The shadow wanted him. I had to end this. With trembling hands, I moved the final piece. The room trembled, reality bending. The shadow's grin faded, replaced by something darker, hungrier. "Well played," it said. "But remember, we're always watching." The room returned to normal, Jacob oblivious to the cosmic game we'd played. But I knew. The shadow had marked us, bound us to its twisted rules. As I lay in bed, I wondered what price I'd paid. What had I unleashed upon my family? And in the silence, the whispers returned, promising secrets, power, and a fate beyond comprehension. The shadow's presence grew more oppressive. It no longer confined itself to Jacob's room, it seeped into our lives like a malevolent fog. Laura remained blissfully unaware, but I saw the signs, the flickering lights, the cold drafts, the way our cat hissed at empty corners. The whispers followed me everywhere, urging me to make the final move, to claim my prize. I researched, desperate for answers. Old books, obscure websites, whispered legends, I devoured them all. They spoke of ancient beings, hungry for souls, their existence tied to forgotten rituals. The shadow fit the description, a grinning specter, a bridge between realms. But what did it want with Jacob? And why had it chosen us? One night, as the moon hung low, I confronted the shadow. I stood in the center of our living room, the game board laid out before me. The pieces were no longer wood and plastic, they pulsed with otherworldly energy. The shadow materialized, its grin stretching from wall to wall. "Your move," it said, its voice echoing through my mind. I hesitated. The stakes were clear now, Jacob's soul against mine. I glanced at the clock, midnight approached. What happens if I win? I asked, my voice steady despite the fear gnawing at my insides. The shadow leaned in, its breath icy. Freedom, it whispered. Release from this eternal game. But if you lose, it gestured to the board, where a piece shaped like Jacob sat, eyes wide and innocent. He becomes ours. I clenched my fists. And if I forfeit? The grin widened. Then you join us. Forever. I studied the board. The path was treacherous, filled with traps and temptations. I moved a piece, and the room shifted. The walls bled, revealing glimpses of other worlds, twisted forests, desolate plains, and a void where stars wept. The whispers intensified, urging me to hurry, to decide. Jacob appeared in the doorway, rubbing his eyes. "Daddy, who are you talking to?" he asked. I forced a smile. "Just an old friend," I said. "Go back to bed." The shadow chuckled. "Choose," it urged. "Time is running out." I moved another piece, sweat trickling down my spine. The room twisted, memories flooding my mind, Jacob's first steps, his laughter, the warmth of his tiny hand in mine. I couldn't lose him. Not to this abomination. "Last move," the shadow whispered. "Claim your prize." I looked at Jacob, his innocence a beacon in the darkness. "I forfeit," I said, my voice breaking. "Take me." The room convulsed, reality tearing apart. The shadow lunged, its grin splitting its face. Pain seared through me as it consumed my soul. But as my vision dimmed, I saw Jacob's tear-streaked face. "Daddy," he sobbed, reaching for me. And then I was gone, swallowed by the abyss. Laura found me the next morning, slumped in the living room. She wept, unaware of the bargain I'd struck. Jacob clung to her, his eyes hollow. The shadow was gone, but its whispers lingered, promising secrets, power, and a fate beyond comprehension. Now, as I drift between worlds, I watch over them. Laura insists it was a fever dream, that I'll recover. But I know the truth. The shadow waits, patient and hungry. And sometimes, when the wind howls and the lights flicker, I hear its laughter, the grin that haunts my every thought. Story 21. The Shifting Visage. I always believed our home was a sanctuary, a place where memories nestled in every corner like cherished heirlooms. But lately, it's become a mausoleum of the mind, where the familiar turns foreign and comfort breeds dread. It started subtly. The photographs of my husband, Jonathan, which adorned our walls and mantelpieces, began to betray my recollections. His smile, once warm and inviting, now seemed to leer with a cold, unfamiliar twist. Each day, I'd pass by our wedding photo, and his eyes would follow me, their colors shifting like the autumn leaves. One moment they were the soft brown I'd fallen in love with, the next, a piercing green that sent shivers down my spine. I'd blink, and they'd revert, leaving me to question my sanity. His face, too, morphed with each glance. The jawline sharpened, the cheeks hollowed, and sometimes, a scar appeared, slithering across his skin like a serpent's trail. The changes weren't confined to the frames. They spilled into my reality. At breakfast, I'd study Jonathan's face, searching for the man I married. But the details eluded me, like trying to recall a dream upon waking. His features were a blur, a watercolor painting left out in the rain. I'd reach out, tracing the lines of his face, hoping for clarity, but my fingers met only the cold glass of the table. Our conversations turned cryptic. He'd speak in riddles, his voice a melody that no longer carried our tune. At night, he'd whisper secrets into the dark, tales of lives I couldn't remember living, of places we'd never been. His touch, once a source of solace, now felt like the caress of a stranger. The bed we shared became an ocean, and I was adrift, clinging to the flotsam of our past. I confided in my friend, Elise, who suggested it might be stress or a trick of the light. But when she came over, even she couldn't hide her unease. "There's something off about these pictures," she admitted, her voice a hushed tremor. We decided to confront Jonathan, to demand answers, but when we turned, he was gone. The house echoed with a silence that seemed to mock us. That night, I lay awake, the moon casting shadows that danced like specters across the room. The photos whispered, their voices a cacophony of discordant tones. I rose, compelled by a force I couldn't resist. In the living room, the pictures were alive, the faces within them contorting in silent agony. And there, in the center of it all, was Jonathan's portrait, his features a jigsaw puzzle of mismatched pieces. As I reached out to touch the glass, a chill enveloped me. The image rippled, and Jonathan's face settled into a new configuration, one that bore no resemblance to any version of him I knew. My heart raced, and a scream clawed at my throat as the realization hit me. I couldn't remember what my husband looked like. Not anymore. The house breathed, its walls exhaling secrets. I wandered its dim corridors, drawn to the attic like a moth to a flickering bulb. The air up there was thick with memories, and as I climbed the creaking stairs, I wondered if I'd find answers or plunge deeper into madness. The attic was a graveyard of forgotten relics, a rocking chair with frayed upholstery, moth-eaten blankets, and a dusty mirror that seemed to hold its breath. I stood before it, my reflection wavering like a ghost caught between worlds. The glass was cool against my fingertips, and I whispered Jonathan's name, hoping for a sign. The mirror obliged. His face materialized, but it wasn't the man I married. His eyes were twin voids, swallowing light, and his lips curved into a smile that promised both salvation and damnation. "Remember," he murmured, and the word echoed through my bones. I traced the contours of his face, desperate for recognition. "What happened to you?" I asked, my voice trembling. But the mirror held no answers, only the shifting visage of a stranger who wore my husband's skin. That night, I dreamed of a forgotten room, the one we'd sealed off after Jonathan's accident. He'd fallen from the attic ladder, they said, but I remembered differently. His scream had echoed through the house, and when I reached him, his face was a mask of agony. The paramedics took him away, and I was left with a void where his features should be. In the dream, I pushed open the door, and the room yawned like a hungry mouth. The walls were lined with photographs, each capturing a moment from our life together. But Jonathan's face was a puzzle, the pieces rearranging with every blink. I stumbled toward the window, and there, in the moonlight, I saw him, a shadow on the lawn, his eyes hollow, his mouth twisted. "Remember," he whispered, and I woke, drenched in sweat. The mirror beckoned, and I climbed the stairs, my heart pounding. Jonathan's reflection awaited me, but this time, it was different. His eyes held sorrow, and his mouth trembled as if trying to form words. "Help me," he mouthed, and I pressed my hand against the glass. The mirror rippled, and I stepped through, into a world of fractured memories. We stood in the forgotten room, surrounded by photographs. Jonathan's face shifted, and I wept, unable to hold on to the truth. He led me to the window, and there, in the moonlight, I saw our past, the accident, the fall, the shattered glass. But Jonathan's face remained elusive, a kaleidoscope of pain. "Remember," he said, and I understood. He was trapped, his essence scattered across time, waiting for me to piece him together. I returned to the mirror, my resolve firm. "I'll find you," I vowed. But the glass was empty, and the room dissolved, leaving me standing in the attic, alone. Now, as I write this, the photographs watch me, their eyes shifting, their mouths whispering. Jonathan's face eludes me, but I won't rest until I unravel the mystery. For in those fractured reflections lies the key to his salvation, or our damnation. The house became my obsession, its walls closing in like a vice. I tore through drawers, searching for forgotten albums, desperate to reclaim Jonathan's true face. But the photographs mocked me, their inked memories shifting, their subjects slipping away. Elise visited less often, her eyes avoiding the frames. "You're losing yourself," she warned, her voice brittle. "Jonathan's gone. Accept it." But I couldn't. His absence was a void that threatened to swallow me whole. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, I stumbled upon an old camera. Its leather casing was worn, and the lens held secrets. I loaded it with film, determined to capture Jonathan anew. perhaps the analog world would preserve him, keep his features from slipping away. I wandered the house, snapping pictures of empty rooms, of shadows that clung to corners. The camera clicked, and each frame held promise. But when I developed the film, Jonathan's face remained elusive. His eyes were hollow, his mouth a chasm. I wept, the tears smudging the images. In the attic, the mirror beckoned. Its surface rippled, and I stepped through, into the fractured memories. Jonathan awaited me, his form flickering like a dying flame. "Remember," he pleaded, and I vowed to unravel the mystery. The forgotten room held answers. I tore down the wallpaper, revealing layers of history, the faded floral patterns, the stains left by tears. The photographs clung to the walls, their edges curling. Jonathan's face stared back, but now, it was different. His eyes held sorrow, and his mouth trembled. "Help me," he whispered, and I traced the contours of his face. The pieces shifted, aligning briefly, then fractured again. "Why?" I asked, my voice raw. "Why can't I remember?" He led me to the window, and there, in the moonlight, I saw our past, the accident, the fall. But this time, I understood. Jonathan's essence was scattered across time, trapped in the photographs, waiting for me to piece him together. I returned to the mirror, my hands trembling. "I'll find you," I vowed once more. But the glass was empty, and the room dissolved. I stood in the attic, alone, the camera clutched to my chest. The final photograph beckoned, a self-portrait, Jonathan's face a blur. I pressed it to my lips, tasting salt and desperation. "Remember," he whispered, and I closed my eyes. The camera clicked, capturing my reflection. When I developed the film, my face was a stranger's. Jonathan's features had merged with mine, our identities entwined. I stared at the photograph, my heart pounding. The mirror awaited, and I stepped through, into the fractured memories. Now, as I write this, the house trembles. The photographs watch, their eyes shifting, their mouths whispering. Jonathan's face eludes me, but I know, I am the key to his salvation. In the mirror, our reflections waver, and I see the truth. We are one, bound by love and loss, forever shifting, forever seeking. And so, I'll continue my search, my husband's face a puzzle I'll solve, even if it means losing myself in the process. For in the fractured reflections lies our redemption, or our damnation. The end. Subscribe for more true scary stories. Thanks for watching.